Good morning, everyone. Thanks for making the trip in either last night or this morning. It's a delight to see all of you. I think most schools are finished, but a few are still going. So I hope all of you have great plans for summer. I think I heard that there are 12 weeks in the summer season. And so you've now used a couple of days out of that, so make them count from this point forward. There's a lot to do. I'm excited to be with you this morning. We have a great agenda full of exciting activities. And I'm excited about seeing those of you who have been on the student advisory before and meeting the new members. We welcome you. For those that are new to this group, I want to let you know that this is a group that we use a lot for advising us on how we can make better policy decisions for the state of Kentucky. And it's also a group that has moved into an advocacy space on a couple of issues. And one of those we'll spend some time around today. We're very proud of the graduates who have come through this group. So Layla, I think you graduated this year, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Making it through that. So yeah, sorry. It is a group that has had an impact on policy and direction. So we hope that will continue with the new members that are here. As you can see, there's a shrunken version of me beside me. This is my son, Chase. He really wanted to meet all of you and see what this group was about, so he wanted to come with me to work today. We've got him loaded up with some books in case he gets bored and some snacks in case he gets hungry, because he is my son, so that happens. But he's excited about being with you as well. There is one change to the agenda that you have. Toward the end, we have co-designing an ideal school or learning space, and that's an activity I was excited about engaging with you on. But I think it's something that we're going to hold on, and instead, I know that some of the other presenters today are going to reference the Uvalde shooting and what happened in Texas, and just as we learn more about that now. But I really wanted to have some time for you to dialogue what you know about that, have a conversation about it, and then for this group to have a discussion around and perhaps organize your time into a white paper or a position paper that makes recommendations to policymakers from a student perspective on how we can better secure schools and make them safer spaces. What are some steps that we could take? Because in spite of all the good intentions and energy and research that adults are doing on this issue, you are the ones who are spending the most time in school right now, and you're our best experts around what the student experience is and how it could be made more secure. So we'll swap out that item for later, and so I look forward to engaging in that conversation with you. So I think, Tony, we've got some new members that we want to welcome and some exiting members that are coming off.
We do. So I just want to go ahead and first of all, those of you who are here, we'll do the roll call. For those of you that are joining us virtually, if you can just type in here when you hear your name, and that would be great. So I'm going to start with our new members who this meeting was not obligatory. I just said if you could come in just to say hello so you all get to meet them, especially our seniors who will not have a chance to see them again. I'm going to start off with the list. So we have Hunter Combs going into 11th grade at Knott County High School. Jude Dela, she's a senior at the Ignite Academy. Jude will also be our student representative on the Kentucky Board of Education. She was appointed to that position a couple of months ago. Justin Dunning, an 11th grader from Lyon County. And can you all test your mics too and see if you can, just Justin, see if your mic is working.
Is it working?
It is, great. Yeah, why don't you guys, if I say your name too and you're here, go ahead and say hello, as well as typing it into the chat. We have Raymond Dutt, 11th grade at DuPont Manual High School.
Rohit?
No, I think it might be related. Is it? I wondered. It's a sister of Rohit. Yeah. I wondered about that. I wasn't sure. Peter M. Jefferson, he's going to be a sophomore at Henry Clay High School. All right. Nyla Johnson, she is a senior, going to be a senior at Eastern High School. All right, we have Shraman Carr, going to be a junior at DuPont Manual High School.
I hear.
Perfect. Great. Okay, now this name I might mess up, so you'll have to correct me if I have it wrong and you're here. Vijay Kumar Karthikeyan, a junior at Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School.
I'm here. Technically it's Vijay Kumar, but I go by VJ, so yeah.
Vijay, perfect. How do you pronounce your last name?
Karthikeyan.
Okay, perfect. Great, nice to meet you. We have Callie Oblander. She's going to be a senior at Meade County High School.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay. We have Tanvi Rakesh. She's going to be a sophomore at Cooper High School in Boone County. All right. Chloe Ralston, going to be a senior at Lincoln County High School. Amy Rablero Perez, going to be a junior at Bardstown High School. We have Macy Spiegelmeyer. She's going to be a sophomore at the Kentucky School for the Blind. Luke Taylor is going to be a senior at Davis County High School. I'm just going to say a senior, so I'll refer to our other seniors as graduates now, even if you haven't graduated yet.
I'm here.
Luke, perfect, great. Mally Taylor, she's a junior at Craft Academy from Rowan County High School. All right, looks like we have Sarah Umbarger, a junior at Marshall County High School.
I'm here.
Sarah Yu, a senior at Highlands High School in Fort Thomas, Independence.
Hi, I'm here.
Wonderful. All right, and then we have, those are 17 of our new members, and they are joining our returning members. And I'll just briefly call their names. I don't see Gavin here. I'm not sure if he's joining us virtually, but Gavin Bruning, a senior from Elizabethtown High School. Charlie Browning, a senior from Marion County High School. I know Charlie messaged, she's in some kind of a softball championship playoff type of thing. So good luck to Charlie. Delaney Doherty, senior. She is here in person. Arnav Dharmagata, senior at Russell High School, Russell Independent. William Oliver Fagenbush, Ollie Fagenbush. He is from Montgomery County High School, a senior. Lauren Little, a senior from Clinton County High School. Ella Luking, a senior at Frankfort High. Was just on the governor's press conference the other day, in case you all haven't missed her. Anastasia Panarentos, a senior from South Oldham. Cannot believe she's finally a senior. She's been on the council since she was a sophomore. Spandana Pavlari, a senior at Central High School in Jefferson County. Alexandra Perry, a senior at Ignite Academy in Boone County. Sophia Rattone, a senior from Atherton High School in Jefferson County. And Bentley White, a junior, finally have you right, a junior from the Kentucky School for the Deaf. So congratulations to our new members that are joining us for the first time. Our first regular meeting of the 2022-23 school year will be, I believe it's on my birthday, it's August 23rd, it's easy to remember. And I will make sure that you get an invite for that. We typically meet on Tuesdays, usually the third Tuesday of every month. There might be some fluctuation with that with the new school year, but I'll work on getting a schedule out to you all so you can put that on your calendars. And then we have 2 in-person meetings a year. So this is our first, actually be our second meeting of this school year. We also have one around December, January. So just to kind of give you an idea as to when you might be coming to Frankfort. I think that is it. I also wanted to congratulations to our class of 2022. Seniors, we've been featuring some of you all. If you have not sent me a photo yet, we've been featuring you all on the Department of Education's Twitter page to make sure we get all of our seniors. We're very proud of you. And I think that's it. Commissioner, do you want to say something?
Are there any folks here that we can?
Is there anybody? Yeah, that's good. Probably not have. I do not have you on here. Why do I not have Ari on here? Did you? Maybe? All right. Ari is a senior, just graduated.
I just graduated from Gatton Academy and Greenwood High School in Warren County.
Perfect. You know what? I think, you know what I don't have is the seniors that graduated, because Trevin's not on there either, and Logan as well. Why don't you guys start? So Ari went, and then go ahead, Solela.
Hi, I'm Solela. I just graduated from Ballard High School in Louisville, Kentucky.
I'm Logan. I just graduated from Belmore in Lexington.
I'm Sam. I just graduated from Davis County High School in Litchfield.
Okay, hi. I'm Solayana. I just graduated from Eastern High School in Jefferson County.
I'm Roheen. I just graduated from Manual High School.
Just real quick, I'd like to know the seniors, what are your plans for next year? So Roheen, let's start with you.
I'm gonna head to Indiana University.
Perfect.
I'm Julia. I just graduated from Round County Senior High School, and I'm going to go to Eastern Kentucky University.
Hi, I'm Vanessa. I just graduated from Russell High School. I'm going to University of Chicago.
I'm going to be going to Pomona College.
California?
Yeah.
All right, so Liz.
I'm going to Center in Danville.
I'm gonna go to UK.
I'll be at UK.
UK?
I'll be at U of L.
U of L. That was a last minute
It was.
switch. You okay? University.
10 minutes before the deadline. That's okay.
All right, any of our seniors online, if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, I should say our graduating seniors. I know I heard from Trevor, I'm not sure if he's here. Well, if they come on, we'll have them introduce themselves as part of the conversation. But very excited to have everyone here today. And back to you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Next up on our agenda, we've got Associate Commissioner Dr. Byron Darnell here with his spectacular bow tie. All the way from Bowling Green. To lead us through an exercise around amplifying student voice. And students, I will let you know that at 9:30 I have another meeting to hop over to, so I'll go to that and then come right back here to be part of this. But Byron, the floor is yours.
Well, let's hope we're early.
Are we early?
Well, our
Okay,
guests
9:30.
were 9:30. So.
Okay, do you want to see if they're
I
on?
mean, they could be. Did you send them the link?
I did send them the link, but
Okay.
I can't see, my battery is dead on my laptop, of course, so I cannot see if they've joined us. If you want to see if they've joined us. What are their names?
It is Ian and Jack.
Ian and Jack. Do we have an Ian and Jack who have joined us?
Do you want to wait till later, Byron? Can we move up the?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's do something quick. Then we're not too early out, but still 10 minutes. So have some. I'm hoping everything works out together. I've invited some special guests to introduce you all to. I think part of what we can do as the adults is to make connections for you all and expand the network a little bit. So that's kind of the idea of the time with you today. But just because you all have been sitting and whatnot, stay for a second. And I just want to know what you're most looking forward to this summer. So, Raheem, we'll start with you, and I'll let you toss it to the next person.
I'm looking forward to visiting my family in India. Oh, Bentley.
I'm looking forward to pet sitting my friends' guinea pigs.
I'm looking forward to road tripping with friends.
I'm looking forward to GSP with any of my student friends.
I'm looking forward to
doing nothing this summer. It feels like I've been doing something every summer.
I just got a job at the farmer's market and I'm like so excited about it. And like, I don't know why, but I'm just so excited about it. Even though I have to wake up at like 6 in the morning, but I'm very excited for that.
I'm looking forward to the National Educators Rising competition this year. I'm really excited.
I'm looking forward to going out west.
I'm kind of with Ari. I don't have anything, so
I'm so excited about that. It's exciting. You can get some tips from Commissioner about out west. I'm just looking forward to the kids in summer and maybe some pool time.
I'm looking forward to competing at Nationals for FBLA.
I have a cram-packed summer and I'm terrified. I'm just going to be tired the whole summer. But I'm looking forward to a few college tours and hopefully figuring out what's happening next summer.
I'm looking forward to GSP as well.
Yeah, GSP.
I'm looking forward to going to DC and working with NASB.
I am looking forward to just spending some time with family at the house and doing some crafting this summer.
And so you acronym this. NASB is
Yeah, it's the I don't even know, National Association for State Boards of Education.
Yeah. So Liana's one of the Kentucky's one of the few states that has a student member. And so yeah, that state organization of those state board members around the country are interested in what you have to say. So what are you going to be working on?
Well, just spreading their student voice movement, making sure that the majority of states have the student council, and they're also doing some sort of collaborative with students across. So we're working to build that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me you went.
Yes, I did.
Okay. I'm looking forward to spending some time with Chase and his sister Nora. And what are we going to be doing, Chase? What are you looking forward to? Playing with my friends. So I'm going to be left aside.
What about our students that are joining us online? If you want to just try not to jump on each other, but feel free, whoever wants to go first, and then kick it off to our next person. I'll call on you if I don't hear from you.
All right, I'll go. I'm Sarah, and I'm excited for GSP this summer.
I'm Sophia. Hello. I'm excited I have some friends in Lexington that I haven't been able to see during the school year, so I'm excited to see them in the summer.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Jude, and sorry.
Go ahead, Jude.
I am excited to continue traveling and seeing my family in Jordan.
Hi, I'm Shawmin Carr, and I'm excited to go to GSE this summer.
I'm Sarah, and I'm also excited to go to GSE this summer. And I just got a waitressing job, and I absolutely love it. So I'm just excited to do that this summer.
I'm Callie, and I'm excited to go to GSP this summer.
I'm VJ, and I'm excited to go see family in India this summer.
It's Traven. I'm excited to do nothing this summer, and I'm sick right now, so I'm not excited for that, but
When I said your name 3 times, I knew you'd show up. Who's next?
I'm Chloe, and I'm excited to go to GSP this summer.
Is that Chloe? Chloe, okay.
I'm Justin. I'm a lifeguard at Venture River, so that's what I'll be doing most of the summer.
I'm Luke, and I'm excited for GSP this summer.
Macy, did I see you? Did you come on yet?
My name is Macy, and I'm excited to spend time with my family this summer.
All right, did I get everyone? If I didn't get somebody, can you raise your hand and then just let us know maybe you're having audio difficulty or something, and then that way we'll be able to tell. But it sounds like we're doing really good on the mic check. So. Perfect. All right.
Good. You all can see. Just because I stand all day, that's not normal for most people. Sounds like there's a lot of GSP, which is fantastic. You all are going to, gosh, have a tremendous experience. The people that you're going to meet, the friendships you'll make. So congratulations to those of you all that will have that opportunity. And for those that are still in that window, high encouragement for considering it. Also, just for the national competitions too, FBLA, Educators Rising, that is outstanding. And you all will represent the state wonderfully. So I do want to take just a moment to brag on Soyana for a moment. She and Andrew Brennan attended a meeting for the Chief Council of State School Officers, which is a whole lot to say, which is basically all of the commissioners in the states that are part of the membership. So it's a wide audience. Most states are involved or have a membership to it. So there was a meeting in Jacksonville, Florida, and Sujana and Andrew of the Kentucky Student Voice team were able to come and share some insight with a room full of adults that they've never met, and who tend to kind of be very serious, serious-minded. We're working, we're state workers, we got too much to do, it's a burden, but they came in and just frankly, they stole the event. The adults were just in awe of what they were sharing about what is happening in Kentucky. First off, I cannot tell you how many people came up to me afterward saying, "What are you doing? What's going on in Kentucky? How did you, where did you find these great people?" And of course, the answer is like they're in your states. You have these wonderful people everywhere, talented, engaged, and unfortunately, we've heard before, we sell you all short in a lot of ways, and that is the power of this group, in my opinion, as that opportunity. And I just want to say thank you to Shoyana, because I know she had to travel, she had to come back to take finals and to school, all the things happening, but it was awesome. And it was meant to, I wish we had a recording of it because it was so good, but it was meant to be a safe space. And so the respects of just kind of the confines of that room, but I just can't tell you. And so I say that because, again, it just reaffirms to me the importance of you all, and the fact that you're here, you're online, and you're engaged today. And so what I thought I would do is connect you a little bit of the past meets the present. And so in working with Dr. Glass in the state of Iowa, this was around 2013. Did Jack come in?
I think I saw Jack come in.
Yeah, did Jack get in? Someone who's running the show? Yes, there he is. Hey, Jack, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. I'm just doing a little brief introduction here. I don't know if Ian has joined yet, but I'm just kind of giving a little preview to why I invited you all here today. So give me just one moment. So in 2013, Dr. Glass was the commissioner, called a director in the state of Iowa. And then getting the opportunity to do some work with him, the thing that bothered me the most about going into the state building was that it just was drab. I mean, this building's pretty nice. It's newer, but it's still a state building, right? Like you just have a feeling there's this, and I was this building was worse. It was like 1970s, just nothing about it screamed, we are about the students of the state here. So that sort of originated with the idea of coming up with a council. The Student Learning Council was sort of the name for it then. and opened up an application process to form just basically what you all are doing here. And this goes back to, Jack, was that 2013 when you jumped on, or 2012?
I think it was 2012, but one of those 2 years, yeah.
Yeah, so somewhere along the way. And so I say this very humbly. They they enriched me more than I enriched them. There's no question. But what I hope maybe Jack and hopefully Ian can join too, is kind of not just what happened as a result of being a part at the state level, but what they did way beyond just this group here. So Jack, first off, thank you for your time, sir. Where are you beaming in from?
I'm in Arlington, Virginia right now. It's a long story why I'm outside on a patio, but hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yeah, no, it's quite all right. I'm just grateful that you're willing to give us some time, and it's so good to see you, sir.
Yeah. Ian's getting on any second now, he said. So.
So I just asked. I reached out to Jack and Ian because the whole group was fantastic, and it was really a coalition. But they really sort of seized this moment and catapulted it into a lot more in their futures as they went into college and really just sort of created a movement, if you will. And so that's kind of what I just hope maybe they would share with you all, is just kind of how it went from being in the stateroom to then becoming an actual nonprofit, to then sustaining themselves as a standalone entity. So, Jack, do you want to talk a little bit about just your experience and how that came to be from the Student Learning Council and then into ISLE and it's as it is now, really?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for having Ian and I. I was so excited when we got your Twitter message, and always very fun to talk about what we did in high school. And so I graduated in 2015, so this has all been several years now. Yeah, I guess I can kind of start by talking a little bit about the root of my interest in education and kind of what that then led to, as Byron described. So I originally from Dubuque, Iowa. It's a small town, it's 60,000 people. So for Iowa, that's a pretty big city in the eastern part of the state. And I'd always been interested in the policy process and just the news and kind of following what was going on. But in 8th grade, I won this essay contest, and as part of that, we went to the state capitol in Des Moines, and I was just completely enamored by what was happening there and just sort of how the legislative process worked on the Senate and the House floor, and thought it was so cool meeting my state senator. And so after that, I was in 8th grade, and I would come home from school and listen to the live stream of the Iowa legislature, which did not make me a terribly popular 8th grader, but I thought it was really fascinating. And I started realizing, though, very quickly that they were talking about issues that affected me. They were debating. There was a very intense debate going on about school funding, and also big education reform package of affecting how teachers were paid and class sizes and testing and all sorts of things like that. I just got really excited about that, but also felt like it was weird that there were all these adults talking about things that were going to affect me as a student more than anyone else. And it didn't seem like there were a lot of young people's voices in that conversation. And so I started writing letters to my representatives, and I started a blog to like write about some of this stuff. And then saw this opportunity that Byron had created to apply to be on the Learning Council in Iowa, and then was able to find some more students that were also interested in these issues and talk to some of the people making those decisions, like Dr. Glass and Byron. That was just a really important part of as a freshman and sophomore in high school, what I was interested in. And then through that blog that I had started, like, there were some teachers in Iowa that started reading it, and they started kind of asking me questions. And one of them invited me to this conference where some teachers would be talking on a Saturday about different issues. And so I went to this conference. It's called Ed Camp Iowa. There were a couple different sites across the state, but I was in one site, and Ian happened to be at one of the other sites, and we connected on Twitter and kind of realized we were the only students at this conference full of teachers. And we had a great time, again, talking about lots of issues that felt really important to us as students. And the teachers really enjoyed having us there, and we felt like it was important. We really felt like more students should be involved in events like that and in discussions like that. So I don't know if Ian, you want to kind of take it from there.
Hey Ian, how's it going, sir?
I'm good. How are you? I was trying to, get as close to the screen as I could to see if that was Byron in the back.
Yeah, I know. I apologize. You all have a terrible view. It's got to be really awkward.
No, it's okay. We're doing what we can in the digital world here.
That is true. So we have about half in person and then half joining us online, as you all are. And these are just fine Kentuckians that are in a similar position as you were back in 13, 14, kind of this platform and opportunity. And as I was saying with Jack beforehand, I just can't thank you enough for giving us a little bit of your time. But I thought this would be a great past meets present, because all kind of started here, but now your lives have gone on into wonderful things. But as I was telling them earlier, it went from just being kind of this state advisory to you all really just blowing my mind in what you did. So maybe, Ian, if you could take, so Jack kind of about the premise of the starting of the sort of the state council, but then after that, you all took it further, correct?
Yeah. So not to bore anyone, but I'll back up a second too here. So I've always wanted to be a teacher, and then I wanted to be a librarian. And currently I'm neither, actually. So funny how that works out. But that was like my trajectory in caring about education, was just having teachers that like recognize, we need more teachers in the field, and really kind of mentoring me at like a young age in middle school and high school. And that's how I got to meet Jack at that conference that he was talking about as well. And we realized, we were the only young people there talking about all these decisions that were going to affect us. Students are the most numerous stakeholders in education. Y'all are experiencing it more than anyone else, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It impacts a big, significant part of your life. And on the other hand, knowing that, like, y'all have a lot of ideas about what needs to change, what should be happening. We don't live in a siloed world anymore in terms of like, what is happening online and other places in the world, and like what you want to be learning about and deep diving more into, and affecting change locally and afar. So Jack and I kind of realized that too a while ago. And that is why we, from that one event, decided that we were going to kind of flip the script and plan an event for, rather than, teachers and adults, to talk about this kind of stuff about like, schools and what you want to learn and how you want to learn it and what you want to do in the world. But I had a whole conference that like where young people did that, where students did that. So 6 months after the conference we attended, we planned our own version that was kind of like, an upside down version of what we went to. And let me see if I can do some sharing. So we do have some photos from this event back in the day. And it started as just a whole, like one event, we didn't have at the beginning, I'll say, right, a whole vision, a whole plan, a whole strategy of we're going to do, X number of events this time a year, like with this purpose. It really did just start because we, took the initiative and took the first step and kind of built the ship while it was flying. So I'm not as good on Teams, I'll say here.
The share button at the top, close to the leave button.
Open system preferences. Ooh. Let's see if this.
While Ian does that, I can sort of, what we ended up doing is we got about 200 students from across the state. We sent out all these invites about this conference. We called it the Iowa Student Learning Initiative it was November 2013, for students across the state of Iowa to come and talk about education issues. And so everyone came to Waukee High School on a Saturday morning, and in the morning we had a series of speakers to kind of get folks thinking about education from more of a stakeholder perspective, and some of the kind of getting people to think of like, what if you could change school, what would that look like? And then in the afternoon we had breakout sessions where folks could talk in smaller groups about some of those specific issues. Like we had one about assessment and testing. We had one about I don't remember the full list. I mean, there were dozens of them, but about like
technology use
technology
and cycling and
yeah.
classes, LGBTQ issues, voting. Yeah. I don't know if this is sharing or not. It doesn't necessarily matter if it is or isn't. But like Jack said, there's just tons of great ideas that came together that afternoon. And through, I think, 5 or 6 years after the last time we counted, we ended up working with like 200 out of the 300 school districts within Iowa. So it became kind of I would say, large impact. The other thing that we realized as we started doing this was that we did need that kind of like, what is, I guess, formally called a theory of change. So like, what are you gonna do about it? What is our impact versus like, let's just plan an event and, not really having like a goal or takeaways or outcomes. So really trying to think of like, what outcome were we trying to affect? And as we thought about that, it was, we need to empower, young folks and kind of rise up and let people know they have this voice first off, and can and should be using it. But an even bigger part of that goal, yeah, let me see, you can try sharing this, Jack. I might have.
Yeah, it's probably some mirror image teams, most likely. We see your background. It looks pretty.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so it's not the whole deck. All right.
Ah, there it is.
There it is.
All right, look at, oh my gosh, Jack, this is the first time in 10 years you've beat me to the technology thing. Amazing. Cool. So, sorry, I've been sidetracked, but we realized that, we wanted to do more than just, plan events and raise awareness. So that was kind of the launch of our Day on the Hill, which I know there maybe is some similar stuff in Kentucky or similar days of action. But it felt very important to us that if people wanted to think about how they can affect change, that means knowing how to do it at all levels. So how to, have conversations with your principal to start clubs and do things locally, but also to like learn and understand the like civics process and understand how you can talk to your legislators. In Iowa, it was like almost a question of who is your legislator when people have to come, really far into, from hours away to Des Moines. It can feel kind of far removed when you're at home from what's happening in the Capitol, and we didn't want that to be the case. So we planned this whole, day, Civics Day at the Capitol that happens every single year, and it's happened every year since, minus some of our COVID years there, but it's a really like, I would say, hands-on learning of like all that civics education, rather than just learning it in a classroom and then the young people set and decide the agenda for the day. If they want to, have kind of the 5 main topics, and they divide into groups, even beyond school groups. So one school group might, say, we want more funding for XYZ allocated to this, district. Or like there might be a group of, people from like 7 or 8 different school districts that want to talk about like, timely topic of like gun safety in school. And that was none of the agendas that we set for that. Another one I know that comes up often for us is like charter schools versus public schools when we talk about like funding. So all these kind of, things that people are passionate about, that they're reading in the news, that they have an opinion on, we really tried to bridge that like gap between like what we said, having people in power in the Capitol understand that with young people from, even hours away, that it's a wide issue for their constituencies and beyond.
Yeah, and I guess to sort of back up a little bit, so we had this one-day conference, November 2013, and after that, it was, it went really well, and we wanted to think about what to do to kind of make the ideas that we talked about in that one day extend beyond that one day into something that could be more sustainable. And that's where we had a group of adult educators that were helping plan it and plan the conference, and we all agreed that kind of the best way to move that forward would be, and to make this something more sustainable, would be to form it into an actual organization by the same name, the Iowa Student Learning Institute. So we filed for 501c3 status, and we had a board of mostly adult educators that kind of advised us, and then Ian and I kind of were the operational core of the day-to-day of the organization, and then we also had another wider group of student leaders that helped plan our annual conference. And then once we set the structure of having the conference in the fall and then the rally day at the Capitol in the spring, and then tried to kind of keep a social media presence and create resources for students to use in their own schools and things like that. And then the other thing that we did once, as we kind of tried to create an organization and a brand around that organization, was do a lot of building of relationships with other education stakeholders in the state of Iowa. So Ian and I would go to different conferences and sometimes present to like professional development presentations to educators about student voice and how to better incorporate student perspectives at the classroom level and in the district level. Just tried to kind of be like an active member of Iowa's education community, so to speak. And then filing for the 501 status also made it easier for us to raise money to put on these events. We, each one cost a couple $1,000s, so we would that gave us, we could create a bank account for all that money to go into and such.
You had some advice looking back for the group here. What do you think would be, or what do you believe was the most impactful part of this process or that journey? Like, if they needed to do something, or you could recommend an action, which of those would it be from your past recollection?
Yeah, so I guess I can go through, we try to synthesize some of our big takeaways from all of this before we came here and talked to you. And so the first thing that we thought a lot about is the idea of being a constructive stakeholder. And I think there's a lot of danger when you're student or a group of students trying to like have a say in education, to sort of be tokenized and be thought of as like cute, and that can sometimes work to your advantage. Like that makes it easier for you to sometimes get into spaces and rooms with other people, because there's, yeah, we'll have some students here, but demonstrating strong organization and competence is really important for getting adults to actually take you seriously and kind of move beyond that cute factor. So when we were planning events or putting together any sort of report or presentation, we've thought a lot about how to make it look really nice, which is a small thing, but goes a long way to make you be taken seriously. And when we were planning our events, we were just very, very organized. And I'll never forget when we had the governor speak at our first rally day at the Capitol, and we were working with the governor's education advisor, and she said to us on the phone, like, you guys are so organized, like way more organized than most of the adults I work with. Like, I'd hire you to plan anything. And that was the reason, that was a big part of the reason that we were able to get work with her and have her take us seriously, and then therefore have the governor's office take us seriously. And then the other part of being a stakeholder is thinking about how to use that competence and organization and getting people to take you seriously to be in the right rooms where decisions are being made. And you all have a really unique opportunity to do that because you have a structure where you do that every month, it seems like. And so, but there's always events that are happening, conferences that are happening, meetings that are happening, and to the extent that you can be active in participating in and getting invitations to those meetings and those spaces where decisions are made, and then coming prepared to offer a perspective, that goes a really, really long way to moving from just like sharing your perspective to actually kind of off the cuff to like really having a substantial say in how some of these decisions are made. And again, sort of said this already, but building relationships with other stakeholders. We tried to have active relationships with like the teachers unions, the school board association, all sorts of the librarians association, the technology educators association, all of these different professional groups, and of course legislators at the Capitol, so they knew who we were, they understood our brand, and would think of us for conferences, meetings they're hosting, and just working groups, just having us as sort of a go-to person to include in our go-to group to include in conversations. And then the third thing that I thought a little bit about is the power of agenda setting. So one level of student voice that is a really important level is sort of, again, offering your perspective on things that are currently happening, on bills in the legislature, or proposals that there's school district level or whatever level, from the classroom up to the state level. But there's, when you can actually put forth your own agenda, like these are the issues that are important to us as students, and this is where we think we need to make progress in education, that's a whole nother level where you can kind of then set the bounds of the conversation that you want to be having. And so with the Learning Council, the state group that Byron was talking about in Iowa, we wrote a report about what we, kind of, from our student perspective, the state of education in Iowa, and what we thought kind of the 5 big things, I think it was 5, that areas where we thought there could be improvement, and put forward some policy ideas on that. And so putting things on paper, producing, doing surveys of your classmates, and then consolidating that into a report and doing the hard work of coming to a consensus amongst yourselves so you can put forward a vision, a collective vision about what needs to happen in schools and in education in Kentucky can be a really powerful thing. And that report that we wrote with the Learning Council got press coverage, and we had a meeting with the governor to talk about that. So I don't know, that's just something to think about, and how you can go beyond just offering input to actually setting the conversation. And then making that as bold as you can, especially in the area of student voice. And what does that look like in the classroom? What does that look like in a school? What does that look like on a school board? And what does that look like at the state level? And even drafting, like, what does a draft policy for a school board to have a student member look like that a school board could just adopt? And then I think, have a bold vision. And then finally, involving as many other students as possible. We've talked a lot about buy-in from getting adults to help or to take you seriously and buy into what you're trying to do, but it's just as important to get other students involved in the conversation for a number of reasons. One, the power of numbers makes your voice a lot more powerful, and it's also important. You're all students, and you'll eventually not be students, and so developing younger students to kind of continue to do the work. Once every year another class of students graduates is really important. Something that we had to think a lot about as an organization, and that was always tough to try to do that transition to the next group of leaders, especially when Ian and I left. And then also the kind of students that you're getting a perspective from. We had a lot of students at our conferences that were fairly well-to-do, high-achieving suburban students, and that's an important perspective to have. But it's just as important to have students with other backgrounds and other goals, and make sure their perspectives are included. And historically marginalized groups, like, we ended up doing some work specifically to get the perspective of ESL students, and thinking about all of those different kinds of groups is really important, because they have a unique perspective that is really important for adults to consider also. So sorry, that was kind of a long, sprawling answer to your question, Byron. I don't know if that answers it, but
You look very celestial. There's
the sun in the background here.
the fluttering sun and the birds. Peaceful, man. I like
not
it.
great lighting, yeah.
Well, we have sort of it's almost identical, to the position you all were in. We have a range of just newly minted graduates, like fresh from days ago, to underclassmen as well, and also a brand new selection of candidates coming in. So, and now that, well, first off, Ian, what are you doing today? What's taking up?
The rest of the day, I will go to work in student loan policy here in DC as well. But I guess the two things I'll underscore too from Jack that I think in summary were advice we learned is that people came to us because we didn't just want to complain and say school sucks and you need to do this or that or the other. There was the agenda and that bold vision that was kind of set of having actual solutions for stuff. Right, of if we don't care about this large political issue that's going on, we'd rather talk about this one. I think that was important for why we were doing that. Sometimes people think on social media rather than calling people out online, trying to call them in, and we always like had that theory of like calling people in to have like a conversation to tell them about it, and like helping adults kind of understand and vice versa where we're coming from. And I think the second thing that's proven to be really important over the years, and will be like also very important from like my understanding of what's going on in Kentucky as well from some local organizers that I know, is like understanding how to reframe an issue. So if you like, for example, wanted to do like a day at the Capitol, or we're talking to legislators about education issues, right? Like they very well may try to like tangent to like some other thing that they think is an issue, or that like nationally is like a large political issue. And, you know, being able to have the skills to say like, that is, you know, an interesting thought, but that's not what's on my mind right now. Like that is not what's pressing, you know, 100 students, 1,000 students. Like, you know, we don't care about this large national issue that isn't really an issue in the classroom. We'd rather talk about this one. Like, you know, it doesn't matter what the textbook says. We need textbooks because we don't have money to even buy them. You know, how to reframe that, and kind of having those like talking points back to like come back to your issue have been, I think, also really successful historically for us. So those would be just like my two underscoring pieces there.
Jack, you've also remained in the policy realm too. So you've been plugged in since leaving high school, graduating college.
Yeah. I was did some campaign work actually in Kentucky in 2020, and now work on Capitol Hill. And the work that we did in high school was very formative to kind of, as a high school student, thinking about issues from a policy perspective, and thinking about, you know, what does it take to go from this thing that I see as a problem in my school to a policy solution, whether that's at the state level or at more of a local level. And so using this kind of work as an opportunity to practice thinking as a policymaker can be a really enriching experience for you all. And again, I think thinking about it from that perspective, especially you all having this seat on the inside, so to speak, on this state council, will make you a more effective stakeholder, and to be able to contribute constructively to these really important debates that are happening. So yeah, it's been one of the first step in what I've now been able to do.
My admiration for you all is so high. I mean, it's amazing to see the path that you've taken. That, you know, sort of started in a room just not very much like this one. So I'm hopeful and I'm positive that the same influence and trajectory is going to occur out of this conversation today and 5 years from now. I'm wondering, you all have been a good audience and listening. Here, questions for these two leaders that have sort of been in your position, things that you might want to ask them.
Dr. Barnett, I was just going to add one thing, first of all, before they get into that, is we've had a lot of really excellent projects and work that has come from the Student Advisory Council. And I'm about to call on a couple of people just real quick to kind of summarize some of the work that you all have done, and then maybe go to some questions. I'm going to start with, at the end, Anastasia, because that was kind of one of our first projects that we did as a council. And I wanted her to talk a little bit about that and like the impact of it. Yeah.
So my sophomore year started an equity project, which we're still kind of working on now, but it's kind of like a work in progress, where we took what we talked about with the equity issues and equality issues and turned it into student-led, what it meant for us in the school. So we made a video where we all each member told us what equity and equality, like what that meant, and how we can show that that's okay to express in schools. We made a video, and now I believe we're working on a podcast and some newsletters and that, and we're hoping to continue to build that throughout the year.
And then I was just going to see if someone wanted to talk about what the big project was last year that many people worked on with the Lieutenant Governor.
I'd be happy to share, and hopefully some of the others will be happy to share as well if there's something I forget. But I'd like to say I think this is a project that we're continuing to do. So this is a project that we started last fall. We were reached out to, or several students on the Student Advisory Council were reached out to by Heather Deering and the Lieutenant Governor. Starting off with just these mental health roundtables, which offered the opportunity for students in different regional districts to be able to come together and conduct empathy interviewing, which is something that we practiced in the past on this council, but for Dr. Glass's listening tour. But we practiced the same method where we got to take students in smaller groups and be able to get information, to be able to conduct a conversation that is a safe space for a small group of students, around 10 maybe, that consisted of 4 questions. Now, can I remember the questions exactly? No, not really. But they covered a range of topics, from just what are some things that you experience in school, negative and positive, to what are some struggles that more specifically with COVID that we started to get into. And then eventually our last question was, what's some recommendations that you would make to for legislative change? And so from would take data, and I can see Bentley's running through his papers, but from there we were able to take data and figure out what are the big themes from all of our conversations that we've had that occurred over the span of maybe a month and a half or so. And we were able to create recommendations. Here's the big questions so that we can be specific. The first one was, how does your school home life in general affect your mental health? This is a mental health focused initiative. I probably should have started with that. What mental health resources do you wish you had access to in school? What mental health challenges have you or have your friends faced in the past year? And this was in 2021, just for context. What recommendations on mental health do you have for policymakers? And then we had 2 extra ones that were just in case we had time, which were, what motivated you to come to this event, and what do students need to be mentally healthy? And so this opportunity really allowed a group of us, maybe a dozen, to be able to come together and actually talk about our experiences. And there were several late night meetings that we had where we got to try to brainstorm different, what are the big things that we. And so from there, we got to create about 10 to 12 recommendations, that are drafted. We presented them to several councils since then, and now we got to do a mental health day at the Capitol in Kentucky at the beginning of this month, and formally present all of our or give a preview of all of our recommendations that we've been working on for the past 9 months or so. So now our hope is to be able to put some of these into legislator and see where we can go from there. But if there's anything else I missed on, I welcome any of my peers to add on to it. Cool.
No, I think just I think it's important for you all to reflect on what you really got out of it. What was the best part of it for you?
For me, what I thought the best part of these events were that I felt like we were being truly listened to by people in really high places of power in the state legislature. And sits on a site-based committee and student council, you don't normally see that much attention brought towards student voice and what we had to say. And so to me, that was my big takeaway, was that I did feel like we were making real change. we did help a bill get passed, House Bill 44, which allows site-based to create mental health days as an excused absence. So there was some real change that came from our work. I think there's lots more coming.
I think a big thing was that we were able to like immediately start the conversation and kind of work to eliminate the stigma around mental health right when we had those roundtables.
And another thing is we are presenting to people all over the state, collaborators, to try and help us build these recommendations so that we can make change in the future.
I think one of the most important things was that, like, I think it really opened up, like, people's eyes and ears on, like, that this is a problem, students recognize that it's a problem, and they're trying their best to mitigate it.
And I also, sorry, really like the fact that we hosted these like in different congressional districts across the state. Sorry, it's so horrible. But we were really able to see like students talk about. I'm so sorry, guys. The student voice and kind of what they need in their like respective regions, and we were able to push back the data into those districts and those regions. To allow school districts to prioritize those needs. But we also saw a lot of connections across the state, and so it's something that it's a universal concept that we looked at, but it's also kind of a region to region kind of thing that we viewed at as well.
If it's okay for me to add one more thing, I think that one of the biggest things that like I've gained out of it is that we've created a family and we've gotten to create connections like throughout this last several months. And so the biggest thing, I know that we might have other projects to share as well, but one of the questions that I had was, how do we, I know that Heather Deering will not let us leave this project, but she'll hold on to us tight. But one of the big things is like now that for those of us who are graduating, and we do have like sort of a transition in our lives, how do we go from there to be able to stay connected? And even if it's not something that we are dedicating all of our time to or 100% of our time to, it's still something that when I have that time, I'm putting my 100%. How can we do that? How can we stay involved and make sure that this doesn't sort of simmer out?
Also, if any of our new members would like to join in on this, and if you're interested, just let one of us know and we'll connect you to Heather and the Lieutenant Governor. Absolutely.
Once you're in, you're in.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I would like to make sure that, we talk about ways for our student advisory alum to stay connected. And I hear from Caleb and Anna and the ones from last year a lot. And I really hope that that'll be the case this year and that you guys stay in the group me, maybe not as much, but I mean as much as you want. And, report back when you have something to report back. And I know we have current members that are still involved as well, to make sure that we're continuing this work because it was a lot of work. Lieutenant Governor is, for many of our new members that have not joined, she is a former educator. So she spent time in schools. And so these are things that really matter to her. And so she definitely wants to make sure that this continues far beyond this past school year.
I think that's an excellent question. And I know Jack and Ian, I mean, they've lived this, right? They did the same thing. I mean, that's what we hope. You all are on the cusp of another part of your journey. It's so exciting, and you have every right. You need to dive into that. But I don't know, Jack or Ian, what are your thoughts that, you kind of have this momentum, right? And you're kind of locked in because you're a public student, but, life moves on. Like, I don't know, any recommendations for kind of staying in the fold?
I mean, I think you just never know where the connections you make now are going to go. If you even being connected to your own principal, they might recommend going to a certain school because they know the ed department chair at that university. You just don't know the connections of where they're going to take you. My mentor in college always said, it's just the next step. Everything is just the next step. I think especially as we talk like mental health, there's this pressure for young folks to have it all figured out and to have a whole map and stay on the perfect path forward. And I don't think that's necessarily the case for the world that we live in, or should be stressed about trying to live in. So I just would, everything is the next step. As long as I want to be in policy, I want to be doing important work, I want to be advocating for something within Kentucky. There's definitely ways to get there by networking and just being, an involved and engaged person like you all already are.
Yeah, and first of all, the mental health initiative you guys described is amazing, and seemed really, really meaningful and impactful, and I think tracks on to some of what we were saying about the working with other stakeholders and thinking about your value add. Like you could go and get the input of other students, and in a way that maybe adults trying to do that could not have done as effectively, and then synthesize that into something that can eventually maybe be enacted legislatively. And it was probably very empowering for the students who participated in those sessions. So that's really, really cool to hear. I think in terms of the transition, what's tricky about student voice work is that our identities as students are not permanent. Like we graduate and you're no longer a high school student. And so it's just inherently, you inherently cannot participate in the conversation in the same way that you could when you were a student. These decisions that are being made impacted what you were experiencing every day in school. And I think Ian and I struggle with that. Like we were the founders of Iowa SLI, and after we went to college, we stayed on the board, but I was in school in a different state, and we eventually resigned from the board and kind of cut off our formal involvement in the organization, because it just didn't make sense for us to continue to have a say, because we were college students, and it was time for new high school students to kind of take the reins. And for me, I think what I kind of tried to think about and realize is that this work it's important to do this work where you are, and if you don't, you shouldn't necessarily continue to focus on what is happening in your school, your high school when you're in college. Look around your campus or even the community beyond that and figure out what are the issues, whether it's still education that you want to continue to focus on, or maybe it is something more kind of in the public health space with mental health, or something else that animates you, and trying to find a way to be involved in moving that issue forward in the community you find yourself when you graduate, I think is a more effective way to continue to be an advocate and a leader, and have an impact than, focusing too much on what you have done in high school. I don't know if that's a satisfactory answer or what you want to hear, but that's the way I thought about it when I went to college.
Yeah, and I think eventually it just almost turns into a natural belief or intergenerational communication, in collaboration styles. Even at work today, I lead all of our interns because we just get along better. I from orientation day one will say I trust you to do the work. This is we believe in the power of young people around here. That's why we have interns here. This is not just little piddly work of going to run coffee. You're gonna program and code this whole software for me, because you know how to do it better than I do. And just being able to share that power, once you get older as an adult, or knowing in our case that transition of we were in college and formally left the organization, but we're always a phone call away. I think just knowing how to do that, and sometimes we had to let people struggle a little bit.
Yeah, and moving more into a mentorship role rather than a active leadership role.
Yeah, exactly.
Jack and Ian, I can't express enough gratitude. You've been very, very kind with your time, and extremely proud and honored to just have an association with the work that you all have done and continue to do. I would recommend the ISLE, Iowa Student Learning Institute website has all kinds of wonderful resources, but they are fantastic mentors in their own right, and I have the utmost confidence that the individuals in this room are representing this student voice movement very well. So
Yeah.
I just think giving us some time today.
Just one more question. I know that we had a couple that had questions. Spunna, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I just have a quick question because I know you guys talked about like how representation in terms of like students was really important. And like I know myself along with some other members here, we're part of the Kentucky Student Voice team, and you know, one of the big issues we have is like because we tend to attract, you know, a lot of high performing, higher socioeconomic students just because, you know, the mediums of communication we use often do use technology or things that might be barriers for other students. So I guess like what advice do you guys have to increase that representation? Because I know it's so important, but like trying to do that outreach is like sometimes very difficult.
I would just say, yeah, that outreach is almost a full-time job in and of itself. And always, side note, love to see Kentucky Student Voice Team people around. But I would say like the thing that we found to be kind of successful, at least in our like English language learning, like, you know, big push to try and get, you know, different voices involved in that room too, was being able to like connect to, like, even if it was just a handful of teachers that like were an active following on social media, for example. Like we really like tried to DM and you know, collaborate with them, and that's how we kind of built this, like, I don't know if we had like a name for it, but it was kind of our like you know, teachers that like believed in this mission, right? And you knew they were always going to be like, as the safe spaces in their own schools and their own buildings, like bring folks to conferences, or like knew who like they could tell who always sat in the back of the classroom but like really wanted to say something, and like we really kind of worked with those like educators to be able to like connect them to us as kind of a pipeline, I would say. So that's how we met a lot of people. And the other thing too that was like, you know, before it became kind of like a buzzword thing of like meeting people where they are, I think we were doing that in terms of like before we had an event, like on the way from like my house to downtown to the Capitol, we would pick up 2-3 students that didn't have cars, because they, you know, just didn't have those resources available or whatnot, to make sure that they could get there that day, or being able to, I know like KSVT's talked about like travel budgets and things to get people across the state to get, you know, from the east and the west and from all the different regions of Kentucky. So I think just thinking about like what that equity and access looks like, and maybe has gotten a little bit easier too since when we were doing this work, since more, you know, schools have been kind of one-to-one, and the whole, you know, technology learning online thing isn't like revolutionarily crazy to people like it was in 2016. Now that we've all done it for way too long here, being on Zoom meetings together. But those are just, I guess, few things that come to my mind at the top of it here.
Yeah, another thing I would add is thinking about how to connect students that have certain identities to each other. Like we, with the ESL students we worked with, we got reached out to different students, often through teachers like Ian described, from different schools, and then brought them together in the same room. And that was often more successful than trying to bring a couple of them to a big conference where, you know, it is, again, mostly those high achieving, often suburban students. And yeah, just kind of forming smaller, I don't know if you want to call them working groups or just spaces where they can connect with each other, and then do that same process of what issues do we have in common, and how can we, you know, synthesize that into recommendations for how things can change.
I think that was probably like really powerful too, like reflecting on that to like, especially in Kentucky, similar like makeup wise of like different sizes of districts and like, you know, rural and urban settings. Like there were people that drove, the teacher got the school van for the weekend to come to this event, and like that was the first time and only time that year that they might have been able to like see another queer person was at our conference, and like being able to connect and make that relationship and have kind of even like a mentor or a friend from afar. Just thinking about like how affirmational that was.
And I would say they're highly understating the impact that they had on the equity lens was phenomenal. I mean, they really, it went kind of from the focus on sort of just the group, the group as a whole, to the diversity of the students within the state, and who is not at the table that we could get at the table. They really embraced just the opportunity to open the vault so that it addresses the very question that you posed of how do we get a 50%. So I just have to brag on you. I'm sorry. I have to do it.
I guess my I don't know what your time is here, but always happy to like chat more one-on-one with anyone too. If there's like further questions or things that just don't make sense for a large group, you're welcome to give them our phone number or email to chat as well, Byron. And the other resource too, I would say, is like looking at stuvoice.org. Has tons of resources. They do I think monthly calls even for people that are maybe newer to organizing and using their voice. So being able to even if you're wondering in the room about the difference of equity and equality, they will run through these things with you and really do a really good job of meeting people where they're at and starting this own activism journey.
Thank you so much.
My gratitude, you guys. I sure appreciate it so much for giving us some time and chatting with these wonderful people here. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks for having us.
Keep up the great work.
So we have two options. We can take a short break now if you all feel like taking a short break before we get on to the next item on the agenda, or we can go right into that item and then take a break afterwards. Who's in favor of going now? Who is not in favor of going now? Okay, let's take a 10-minute quick break, and then we will. And you all were each given a water bottle. There's water filling stations that are right outside the restrooms. You'll be able to see where they are.
Restrooms are working.
Restrooms are working this time. Yeah, that was an anomaly. And then for those of you joining online, we will be back. It's about 10:28. We will be back at 10:40. 10:40. All right, welcome back from our short break. So the commissioner is still, we have a local superintendent advisory council that is going on at the same time. So it's a statutory council that usually about a week or so before the Kentucky Board of Education meets, LSAC has to meet. So it just so happened to fall on this day. But he should be wrapping up here shortly with that meeting. So I will carry the meeting until he gets back. The next item on our agenda is end of the year reflection and a mindful moment activity. And with that, I would like to introduce, obviously many of you returning members know Dr. Damian Sweeney. He is our Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Yes. And then we also have with us Florence Chang. And she is one of our new additions to the DEIB office. She does strategic analysis. She comes to us from Jefferson County. And then we also, so Dr. Chang, welcome Dr. Chang. And then we also have Heather Bushelman. She is our school counselor lead for the state. So she is in the position that Dr. Sweeney was in prior to Dr. Sweeney taking on his new role. And so they are going to, I guess, co-lead an activity or some discussion for you all this morning.
Yeah. So good morning. It's really good to see everybody. Nice to meet you. We are so blessed. Our team is new. We've got, of course, Dr. Chang and Ms. Bushelman. We have another member of our team who just had a procedure, so she's out. Her name is Dr. Nicole Fields. And then we're led by Dr. Thomas Liz Tucker, our Deputy Commissioner and Chief Equity Officer there in the back. So we are doing so much work to do much of what you just spoke about, right? Make sure that we're elevating student voice. Whenever we go out to different schools and districts, we're showing educators how to make sure that everything they do is centered on the voices of our students and also our most historically marginalized students and their families as well. So we have a few things that we want to do. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to acknowledge what happened last week. Now, for psychological safety, I will say that we're going to have a discussion about what happened in Texas with the school shooting, and if for whatever reason that could be activating to you or triggering to you in a way, for psychological safety, feel free to step out of the room or walk away from the camera or the meeting if you're on virtually, and just take care of yourself, okay? There's zero judgment by anybody, and I'm going to speak for you students as well. There's zero judgment if anybody needs to walk out. You all agree? If you agree, just give me a thumbs up. Okay. All right. So last week, it was really, really difficult for a lot of people, and most likely everybody in this room had a little bit of a different reaction, right? Based on your own context, your own history, your own experiences. And when you heard about what happened in Texas with our elementary school students and their educators, it likely hurt, right? It was angering for many, it was frustrating for many, it was sad, it was tragic. There's a range of emotions. And one thing that we know on our team is that one of the most important things in education is something called proximity. So knowing that other people are experiencing something similar and that you're not alone in your emotions behind that experience. All right, so the purpose of this conversation is just to put it out there that we know it was difficult and it was a lot to process, and you may or may not have had opportunities to process that in school, and so we want to create that opportunity for you now. This is a safe space, so I would like to just know, how are you doing, and what can we do as a council, advisory council, to help prevent future school shootings? So,
I felt really outraged when I first saw it, very saddened. And then I almost felt like gross afterwards,
Is that gross?
Yeah, like some of the publicly traded gun companies went up 6 or 7%, which was just like, this just makes me feel weird. And I don't know what this council or even if it should be our responsibility to prevent school shootings. I feel like it's I don't think education gets enough money as it is, and to have to spend it instead of education on defending students feels. I don't think that's the right. I don't know. I just feel the whole situation just feels gross, and I think a lot of it has to do with mental health. And I think, I don't know, I think with the Lieutenant Governor's thing, we've seen that mental health conversations can be relatively easy, but I think reaching all the students is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I think talking about mental health more, making sure that everybody feels that sense of belonging that we seek so often, making sure that mental health practitioners are in our schools and available and accessible, those are all steps in the right direction. But I totally understand what you're saying and empathize with that feeling of gross. It is pretty, yeah, I get that. What are some other thoughts?
I think seeing that and especially consistently, obviously this isn't a one-time thing. It makes you feel really helpless because knowing that it kind of takes agreement as as society and for all individuals to like, I guess give in to that and make sure that we're trying to make schools safer, because really all it takes is one person, and then everything falls apart. And like, it's just like knowing that like every day you can go to school and like there's nothing you can do at that point to really protect yourself, and like being told since you were like so young, like how, like if there's a shooter in the building, what to do. Like that is just such a, like the fact that like warnings and systems like that like are even like something that we learn at such a young age is like really terrifying when you think about it. And then like it's also just like scary to see like children so young, because like normally like I don't know, it's just really painful to think about it. And like I don't know, I feel like when we talk about like the mental health side of it, it's like it would take a really intensive effort to make sure, because I mean that's what it takes, one person, and it can change everything. And so if we're really trying to like use mental health awareness and empathy to try and combat feelings of like being outcasted or feeling different or being bullied, like it would take interacting and talking to every single student. It would take things that are, I mean, I think of it as like more equity than equality. Rather than giving all students like the exact same thing, it's giving every student each what they need. But that's a lot of money and time and resources. So like I guess I don't know how we would standardize that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think a lot of it is kind of whole group instruction, but then there's also possible small group or one-on-one interventions that can help. But I also think there's a lot of benefit to peer-to-peer interactions, right? We see somebody that's sitting alone in the cafeteria. One of the things that our team does whenever we go to a school, that's one of the first things that we look for. Are their kids kind of sitting by themselves or isolated? Is there anybody that's going up and just saying, hey, do you want to sit with me? So again, focusing on that sense of belonging, make sure people are doing well. Ask them simple questions. How are you doing today? Make people feel seen and heard. I agree that you may not be able to do everything for everybody, but I think the small steps, the small incremental steps help. What are some other thoughts or reactions?
A lot of people felt a lot of emotions about this, disgusted, upset, angry, whatever. But I don't think very many people felt surprised that it happened. Because this is the only country in the developed world where this is even reality. This is even a thought that crosses someone's mind. You couldn't go to Canada and imagine this happening. You couldn't go to Mexico and imagine this happening. So why are we any different? Why did we let this happen? This has happened 3 times in the past 20 years. And there's not been that much done to change it. A couple things here and there, but putting a Band-Aid on a gushing jugular. Can't fix it without some real change.
Some political change. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
And that's where that's where I was gonna go to. I think it's very. I had to take a step back from it because it's very hard to hear, even though this continually happens. But I just kept on thinking about, the kids and their families and the justice that they need, and I wasn't seeing any of that from, the legislators and the political figures in Texas. It was just mostly thoughts and prayers, and we've had so many thoughts and prayers over the years and not action. And so I was really enraged with that too, that people are not fighting to end this, and it's very, obvious, but, they put on a front and say that, this should never happen again, yet they're not doing anything to prevent this. So I just think that the families aren't getting justice.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And, with this, to Bentley's point, I don't think that many of us were as surprised with this tragedy. And I do think that after this, and what we saw in Buffalo, and what we've seen in California, and all across the country for quite some time, I think there is a call to action for some of our political leaders. And, you know, there are moments where it does feel like they're kind of evading the conversation. People may be evading that conversation. So I do hope that we can have more conversations with people who will listen and create action behind it. But in the meantime, I also agree that focusing on student mental health along with community mental health is a good first step. Other thoughts? Yes.
I definitely think for like Summit, Kentucky, like the Marshall County shooting, I think that really brought up some of those emotions, especially for some of like it hits pretty close, like where we go to school. And I think, especially for the younger kids, like how are they dealing with that? Now that we've seen the high school, but we've never really seen elementary school. And for the younger kids to not have to face that like possibility, like yeah, we talk about lockdowns, but for them it's always, oh, it's not going to happen. But now that it has, how is that affecting the younger kids? We've seen how it affects like the high school kids with a lot of anxiety and like anxiousness going to school. But is that going to affect the elementary school? Is that going to make it worse throughout the years, or how would that impact? And I think that's something that we're having to face now.
Yeah.
How do we talk to elementary school kids about it?
Right. How do we talk to them, and is that anxiety going to be ever present for that, for our seemingly innocent, and should be innocent, elementary age students?
And I would also like to point out that in the year of 2022 alone, the legal definition of a mass shooting, there have been approximately 2 mass shootings per day since January 1st of 2022. Whether it's in a school, supermarket, grocery store, whatever. 2 mass shootings every day.
Yes, say.
With the Marshall County shooting, I remember Senate 1 was passed and that required closing doors and having a school resource officer. Was there any other?
Yes, there were.
Was there any other things that came from that?
Yes.
I don't remember.
So there was something that said there should be a school counselor for every 250 to 1 students. So every 250 students, there should be 1 school counselor. But the operative word there is should. There are trauma teams that are required. So trauma-informed practices are really, really helpful in this work, and acknowledging that trauma exists, acknowledging what's happened to students, either happening to students currently or happened to them in their past, and then provide supports for that. So a lot of that is there. A use of time survey for our school counselors. We have a lot of school counselors, and I can speak from experience that a lot of your job, so we all get into school counseling because we have this desire to be a compassionate leader and teach that throughout our schools. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes we're pulled away for things that may or may not directly serve students, right? And so the use of time part of that was to focus on school counselors spending 60% of their time in direct student services. So like, I'm doing that right now with all of you. And then 20% of your time should be spent in indirect student services. And that would be me like working with, let's say, your FRISC or your teacher or your family on behalf of your needs. So those are some things that were, the outcome of that bill.
So I'd like to add also, this past session, the General Assembly took another step in improving school safety by passing House Bill 63, which requires a school resource officer on every school campus in Kentucky, with exceptions that are allowed by the Office of the State School Security Marshal. And several of you have met Ben Wilcox before. I will make sure that we bring him back on, get him on the agenda sometime this fall, because I think that for some of the newer students and those that have not met our state school marshal, I think he would be a great person for you all to talk with. The important thing to note about House Bill 63, though, is that the legislature did not appropriate the funds necessary to pay for these positions or to place the supports in there for law enforcement to properly train these new SROs. So I think that the bill sponsor was Representative Kenneth Bratcher out of Jefferson in the Louisville area. I think that as we, as we kind of continue on past this next shooting, it's going to be important for students to use their voice and talk about how you feel student safety can be improved and school safety overall. Whether it's mental health or whether it's making sure there is an armed SRO in your building or within an area. Some schools I know don't have those because they just can't afford them. So just important to keep track of that. So that was House Bill 63 from last session.
Right. So as we finish this discussion, we wanted to model for you how to have a conversation that acknowledges those events, that allows students to share your voices, and really allows you to just share your emotions as well, right? Again, we need proximity. We need to be able to process what's happened, talk about it, and know that we're not alone in those feelings. So as we transition, Ms. Heather Bushelman is going to come up and she's going to give you a mindful moment, just so we can transition to our last piece from Dr. King.
And don't forget, we do have kids that are joining us virtually as well. So.
Okay, hi everybody. Hi, I am so humbled to be here with you all today. So I never got to meet you in person, so it's very exciting. And piggybacking on some of the conversation Dr. Sweeney just had, my counselor advisory council is on Thursday at 2 o'clock. And I know I have invited all of you to join, or 5 of you, or whoever, and you get to talk directly to our school counselors from around the state, who are some of our leaders that take our information back to their districts, their regions, and they will amplify your voice. So I would love for you all to come and talk about your mental health initiatives, school safety, because I know they want to hear from you. But because you're all different ages, you are from all over the state, so I would really appreciate if any of you all could join us for those first few minutes of our meeting. So kind of shifting kind of from the conversation back to where we are. So I know with all your different backgrounds and your different journeys you're about to take on, so maybe you just graduated, which is in itself is exciting, and some of you are getting close to that point. So I just wanted to kind of focus with you all about your balance. Obviously, if you're sitting in these chairs or you're sitting virtually, there are a lot of expectations, right? High expectations, which a lot of people in your positions will, they will meet, and that kind of drives you, right? But I want to make sure, especially this summer, that you are finding your balance and that you are able to be a kid and just to shut down when you need to. I know we tell our adults the same things. So I just want to hear from you. What do you do to shut down? To get off technology, to not worry about 10 years from now, 5 years from now, too much from now. So I would love to just know, because I would love to take some of this back to our counselors who, you all know, they want to hear what the kids need when they go back to school come August. Because you all know anxiety and depression are on the rise, and we want to help our kids. So what are you all doing this summer? Just to take a break.
One thing that I do that, I do it almost every week now. Sometimes I get busy and can't do it every week, but I'll go and volunteer at the Roman Colony House, and so that's just a time where, I get to go and kind of give back, but I've been there now since 2019, so I kind of know everyone there, so it's time to kind of catch up with them, to talk about stuff, just, I've been doing myself aside from my actual, real work, I would say, so, not only is it kind of helping the community, but it also feels like it helps me just as much to kind of decompress and take a little while.
Very fulfilling, yeah. And I know those families appreciate it. I've had some families I knew very well that they love the McDonald House, so they are very fortunate that you get to go volunteer. So that's amazing. Okay, anybody else?
Now, I have a luxury that not a lot of people have, but if I want to break, I just take my hearing aid out. That's it.
Yeah, that's a great way to just shut down and
like to do is like sometimes me and my friends will plan like a lake day. So there's not like great service out there, so we kind of just disconnect from like the like social media and stuff like that. So we can't have that like constant impulse of that. But yeah, it's just a really nice time to like connect with nature and disconnect from technology.
I like how you use the word impulse with technology. I know we are kind of about it too with, my phone things, I check it, like it's automatic. So I like that word that you just kind of get rid of it, shut it off, and you focus on other things. What else?
For me, like my favorite thing to do ever is just like go on drives and just listen to music. Like that is like anytime there's like a minor inconvenience, that's what I do. And it's like it's just so relaxing. Just to like, and obviously I'm not using my phone, like, and like it's just like nice to be like I wrote. Yes, I'm not. I just play my music and it's just like really nice. I think it's a good way to disconnect. And then like for me, just like music is that outlet. I was just talking to Mr. Byron about how I went to a music festival and it was like that. It was just so much fun and like nice to just feel like connected, I guess, with like the music and the artists you listen to. So that was definitely like very, very like enriching.
Anybody else or anybody virtual? So Luke, go ahead. Luke Taylor, if you'd like to share.
Sorry, my mic wasn't working, but grabbing lunch and going hammocking with a close group of friends is usually how I decompress during the summer.
Julia was very excited to hear that. Do you like to?
I have like a portable hammock and I love taking it like outside in my backyard and just bringing a book with me and leaving my phone inside and I just love my hammock.
You just lay and just
take naps.
It's impressive you can even put it up. I think I'd flip right over, so I don't know for me if that's a good thing. That probably strikes me up or if I just put it up. That's impressive you able to do that. Okay, anybody else?
I know for me, like my friends and I, like we try to make it a priority like once a month to, we do spend some money. We go on like a little shopping trip. It's like school really, especially for the end of the year, for juniors this year especially, like, they're really stressed out. And like, even if we don't buy anything, it's just like nice because we put our phones away. Like we just scroll through like the racks of clothes. And so most people don't really understand why we do it, or like we just go on a long drive, or we just go on a picnic and we do like a TikTok trend, but we put our phones away and like we do like the colored picnic or whatever. We just like have fun and it's nice memories that we can build while we talk about things without like the pressure of, oh, are we going to get judged for saying something within our small group? So it's really
I love there's no judgment. So I think you mentioned that, especially with social media. That's all right. Well, thank you all for sharing, and I really hope you all can come on Thursday because my counselors would love to hear from you. I know we are very excited about the initiative you're starting with Lieutenant Governor, and it includes a lot of us, and so that's for us. That's so exciting because it's based on you and your student voice, which is counselors. That's what we do. So, so we are very excited to see how this is going to continue to play out. And, but if you need anything, please reach out. Yeah, we are for sure want your voices heard. So I think Dr. Chang is getting her and things like that.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm a data geek. I'm going to throw some numbers at you. So I appreciate so much this conversation. And as Heather's talking about summer, I'm going to bring you into the first day of school now. And I know you all are like trying to recover from this year, but I want you to think about sense of belonging because the research shows that sense of belonging is one of our most important protective factors for kids. When we're talking about prevention of anything, dropout, mental health issues, the first place to start is sense of belonging. And so last spring, and this spring as well, you all who took the state assessment took surveys around your connectedness to school and safety. this data kind of pulls, and I know it's a little bit small, so I will read the data to you, but this is pulling what percent of kids are feeling a sense of belonging. Okay, and this is among high school. We do have middle, we do have elementary, it's all public. If you are a data person, come talk to me. So right now, 80% of our high school students feel a sense of belonging. What does that mean? 1 out of 5 students do not feel a sense of belonging. When you look at that by race, it's 1 out of 4 students of color do not feel a sense of belonging. So we have to know that data to be able to address our division name has belonging. That's kind of our goal, is to build this protective factor in kids. If you remember from Stats Day, standard deviation, if you haven't heard that, it's just a measure of variance, right? So when I say equity is inclusion and belonging, standard deviation is your measure of inequity. The bigger the standard deviation, the bigger the inequity. It means kids are experiencing things at a widely different level. And so when we look at students of color, our African American students, their standard deviation for sense of belonging is 12%. It's the highest among all groups. So they have a very large disparity. Here's what's also interesting. We have 170 plus districts. Okay, and so from the lowest district, we see there's a district or a couple districts where 50% of students of color, Black students, did not feel a sense of belonging. We also have districts at the 100% level. So they can build a sense of belonging for every student at that school. So what I want you to think about with this data, day 1, close your eyes for a minute. Imagine you are a student of a different race walking into a classroom of kids who look completely different than you. Or imagine you are that incoming 9th grader coming from a smaller middle school into this giant high school. You've got 7 classes you're trying to figure out. You're nervous about your schedule, nervous about finding where you're going. Imagine you're that student from out of state or out of the country, and you don't know anyone. Or imagine you're that 12th grader who kind of had a crappy COVID experience, didn't really come to school that much, but you're going to try again, day 1. What can we do at KDE to help our schools set up that sense of belonging from day 1? Think about those experiences you've had with your teachers. So we've got just a few minutes to kind of ponder this, but I want to hear from you all. What can we do from day 1 that every kid feels included? Every kid feels a sense of belonging. And I'm sure from your experience, you've had that range too, right? You probably had classes where you're like, I feel connected here, and then I go to this class and I don't feel that connected here. So what are some critical things that your teachers have done to create that sense of belonging? What can we do better? You can open that up.
One thing I really wish, I guess, is that maybe like more one-on-one time with like counselors and teachers. Like I feel like I really don't get that, and so I don't get to know them as close as I'd like to, and they don't get to know me and understand like maybe what they could be doing to make their students feel more involved or more included in their classes.
Thank you. That goes back to that ratio. Yes.
For me, how I always felt included was clubs. For me, I had a great selection of clubs, but at my school, it's really hard to start a club. So it's a lot of the older clubs I don't think are very, I don't know. Like I think of like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes is, from the Christians, but since it's so hard to create other clubs, like you don't see other religions being do it. Or like a GSA took 2 years to be implemented in our school. It's still not even really a club. I think like just allowing, easier clubs so people can create their own groups would be a big thing for me.
Yeah, affinity groups, clubs, that does absolutely show, research shows that's important for sense of belonging as to counselors, an adult to talk to. Anyone else? What else can we be doing? Yes.
So this is like really specific and it might just be me, but like when like a teacher calls out a student like publicly, like it like I know like in my like own experiences like that feels very like embarrassing and like you're like replaying it in your head and like it kind of gives an opportunity for like other students to like build off of that and like also pick on you or and things like that. So like if like teachers maybe like can try like if they have the opportunity to maybe go more of like a one-on-one route of like telling you if you're doing something wrong or like if you need to change something just so that it's not like in front of a whole class of 30 other students who could like who would listen in on you getting in trouble and just like I don't know like for me that always like ruins my day and I'm like thinking about it all the time like if that ever happens so and I'm sure it's probably the same for some other students.
That's so insightful and not something we always measure, right? It's when you're getting talked to or getting feedback publicly, but absolutely that can create kind of an uncomfortable, relationship. Yes.
I thought this was a COVID thing, but this was, I feel like it's rather simple, but during my AP Lang class, I feel like for most people that AP Lang is pretty rigorous. At least for my teacher, we were constantly being challenged, but no matter what, this was during my junior year, so this was like virtual learning for the majority of the year. No matter what, he set 10 minutes aside for us to be able to talk about how we're doing or just like share something we're excited for. And from the onset of the year, he made sure that like everybody was able to share. And so we would go around and everybody would get to share. And I think that just really helped like me not only get to know people better, especially in a virtual learning environment, but also like I got to know like more about my teacher. And I was actually excited at some points to be able to like tell them like, guess what guys, I just changed my tires. Like I'm becoming an adult. And so it's stuff like that where I feel like it's you get to like have a more personal connection, even if it is like those extra 10 minutes, as long as you're planning, you can still be productive. And so that was something that was really valuable for me.
When I think of like the first day of school, I think like back when I was a freshman and I go to like a pretty large school and so you have all these numbers and there's like directional signs and you have to find like which way you're going, upstairs, downstairs. So I think like what I would like to see and like you could just be like a guideline or whatever, but like even like out front having people like welcome you that first day and then have teachers like saying at their doors welcoming. So just creating like that first impression kind of thing. And then as well as like Selena said, of like having, and even maybe that first full day of school is like basically just getting to know people and like kind of setting expectations, like no learning, just kind of creating that transition back into the school year.
Something that we do at my school that I find really helpful is that we have an open house for like the underclassmen, like we have students from our National Honor Society, like show the students where classes are and they get to meet their teachers before the first day of school so they know where everything is and so that they're not lost and scrambling and struggling to ask for help. And also another thing that I don't really understand is like why are teachers so professional and like private about their lives, because we spend a lot of time with them. So like I feel like it would help me as a student to get to know my teacher better. Like, hey, you have these pets, or like, hey, you travel a lot or something like that. Just like get to know my teachers more personally. I feel like that make me feel like a lot better at ease at school.
Love the balance. Take just two more.
I know this is a very specific example of something that can be done, but I have a friend, she goes to University High School, which is in Orange County, Orange County, California, which is part of it. Anyway, and they have 3 10-minute breaks throughout the day. So after they have 2 classes, there's this block of time, it's 10 minutes, and you're doing nothing. You're out with your teachers, out with your friends, just doing whatever. Then after that 10-minute break, you go back to class. And then 2 hours later, after your next 2 classes, do it again. It's just time to decompress after spending time in class.
Great suggestion. There's a great exercise that some schools have done around shadowing a student, where you follow a student through the day, and you can kind of feel those 10-minute breaks are needed sometimes if you're following a kid from class to class. That would help. Okay, go forward.
So this is less something that was done and more something I don't want to see happen more, but I feel like it's especially relevant to social studies teachers, but being culturally aware when they're discussing history, because like one thing that got really exhausting for me is teachers would like always ask me to speak about Indian history, and I'm like, dude, I'm like, well, I know I'm the only brown kid sitting in this room, you don't have to like ask me, and then it can just feel really othering, and like, like the biggest thing that sticks out in my mind is my AP World class sophomore year. We were talking about caste, and my teacher goes, "Oh, what caste are you?" And I'm like, "Dude, what type of question is that?" Which I didn't say that, but I just let them like, "Oh, I don't know." But I was like, "Dude, what type of question is that?" So I guess just seeing less things like that, and because it makes it feel like the pressure is on us to justify and talk about our own history to make it relevant to the other students, and I feel like less of that would be nice.
That's very insightful. Thank you so much. And I've been there too. We're like the only Asian, so relate. Thank you all so much. This is so helpful. And anybody online, please share in the chat. We're going to compile some of these ideas and kind of reflect and see how we can share, but we really appreciate. Any closing thoughts, Dr. Sweeney, Dr. Spencer?
I just talked with Tony about some things we're trying to do. Certainly, you all are taking the lead on this, about amplifying student voice and being more purposeful and intentional about the work that we do. And I've said this like 15 times now. When I came to the agency 2 years ago, we had a group of students like Anastasia and like Anna and a couple of other veterans who are here now who really taken this work relative to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and really challenged us. And Soliana has really challenged us to always amplify student and teacher voice. And two ways we're doing that. One, with our podcast, it's going to feature our students, but it's also going to feature the voices of Kentuckians across our great Commonwealth. And Dr. Fields, who is not here today, she will narrate, she'll head up, she'll be our podcast host, and I'm sure she has reached out to many of you. And then we're excited about the newsletter, which is going to tell the story of the great things that are happening in our school districts and the great work, dedication of our students and our staff. So again, amplifying student voice, amplifying staff voice, and just really letting folks know about the great work we're doing. As Dr. Darnell said, yes, the country, the nation knows Kentucky has great students. They know that. They understand the work that you all are doing right here and the representation that you all have really displayed that's really elevated Kentucky, again, is being noticed across the entire country. So again, we appreciate that. And the last thing I will say to you, whether you're headed off to college now, a couple of you will run into my daughter, challenge her to always, be fearless and be intentional about this work. If this work is important to you, be fearless, be intentional, and help to knock down barriers.
And we'll make sure to follow up on Dr. Tucker. There's lots of things that have been said today about opportunities to participate, and whether it's with the podcast or with the newsletter or student voice, I'll make sure I've written down everything in my notes to make sure I put it in an email after this meeting, and then also as part of the exit slip. Just there's always opportunities there to say, hey, I'd like to learn more about this, or I didn't hear about this, but or I forgot to bring this up, but I want to bring it up now. So that's always a great opportunity to provide some feedback for us.
And Tony, I will be remiss by giving you, thank you publicly and group when your efforts to really diversify this group to make sure we have more student voices and more student representation on this community as well, and always reaching out to students. So you may not see everyone here physically, but I will assure you all that Tony and the group really worked hard to have more students with different backgrounds, whether it's ethnicity or sexual orientation or what have you, part of this group, because again, representation matters.
Thank you, Dr. Woods-Tucker. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge for us, and I think it's the same what you all had talked about with outreach and with student voice. It's really just trying to get yourself out there with a variety of student groups, particularly not always the ones that are heard. And so that's been something that we've really tried to ramp up on. And as an agency, I know that we're trying to do that with all of our advisory councils to make sure that it's reflective of the schools that we serve. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. The next item is I'll give it back to Dr. Glass since he's back, and he will lead our next item.
Okay, so how long has it been since you had?
About 30, right before this one.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah, we're good.
Well, as I mentioned at the outset, we had thought about having you put together kind of an ideal school, ideal learning environment, what the components that we're going to do that. So I think that'll be an interesting exercise, and save all that and find some ways to share it. But just based on the events of last week, I also think that it's timely that we have this group weigh in on some of your recommendations and thoughts around the topic of school safety and what changes you would recommend that policymakers consider in Kentucky. I'll set the stage just a little bit by saying that I think that Kentucky took some positive steps in 2019 with Senate Bill 1 and the establishment of a statewide system around school safety in Kentucky, really in the wake of the Marshall County shooting at that point. But I think there are always questions about can we do more? And what else should we be doing? And certainly there are things that are societal or cultural that are in place that are driving us. If you look at the number of mass murders and school shootings that take place in the United States compared to any other country in the world, it's stupefying how many there are that happen. We were in the car this weekend coming back from a camping trip, and we have XM radio, so I was listening to the broadcast from the BBC, and there were British commentators talking about it that were stunned that the United States allows this to continue to happen. I know that earlier when Dr. Sweeney was talking with you, and you were thinking through some of your feelings and processing it, that here, while we go through this sort of temporary moment of outrage, it seems to fade and then become sort of normal. Because that's happening now also. I wrote a piece on this last week, just in the wake of that shooting, and that there does seem to be a cycle that we get into this. We have this moment of temporary outrage, and then nothing happens, and we wait for the next one. And it will come. Because I think if we're not doing something to disrupt the status quo system of what leads to these shootings, whatever that entirety of that system is, why would we expect anything to be different? Why would we expect anything to change? We're not willing to do some things for ourselves. So I guess that I want you to have some agency in this, students, to decide if this is something that you want to do, because it's a sensitive topic. It's a political topic. It's something that generates a lot of different feelings about what should or shouldn't be done. So I guess my first question before we engage in this discussion is it something that you want to do, thinking that the product or outcome will be some kind of white paper or statement or set of recommendations to state policymakers, or from a student perspective, here are some things that we would like to see. I'll stop there and just allow you to reflect on that a moment, and anyone can weigh in and just take the pulse of the room on, is this something that you want to do? Julie, I see you're shaking your head. Verbalize that.
I think it's really scary as a student that we practice all of these drills and that we practice red codes and lockdowns and for the possibility of this becoming a reality, and it's still happening despite our efforts to be safe in school. So I think that I just want to be safe in school, and I think that anything that we can do to keep this from happening again is something I want to do.
So you support this?
Yeah.
Others that would build on that or perhaps feel differently?
I feel like it begs the question of why are schools targeting this? I mean, these are children who have their whole life ahead of them. These are civil servants who have devoted decades of their lives to the improvement of their communities and the improvement of the life of their students. Why are schools targeted? I mean, I understand that even going onto a school campus with a gun and stuff, but if someone is going to shoot up a school, elementary school, if they're not thinking about the fact that they can go to jail for 10 years simply taking a gun there, or taking a gun within 100 feet of the place. They're not going to be thinking about that. So why do we let people get the gun and use it to harm children, and use it to harm civil servants who have devoted their lives to these children?
Finley is, thank you. I can tell that you're passionate about this. Is this something that, as a member of this group, you'd be interested in having this group weigh in on those questions?
I agree. I think this is it has a lot of involvement to do with students, and we don't see that reflected in the media, and we don't see that reflected in the conversations, because the majority of the time, these are former students committing these crimes, and it's the students currently who are victims of that crimes, and it's not any legislator or any political figure that's life is on the line. And this is a very hard conversation to have as students because we just have different experience over the one who is being. I mean, we're the one who's being affected the most, and so I think it's a very important conversation to have, not only here but in all schools. And I think schools should make that effort in allowing that conversation to happen.
I think that's really why I wanted to bring it up with you, because it occurred to me that in all of the debates that are happening nationally around this, you see a lot of elected officials arguing about what they think, some people that are experts in this weighing in with what they think. It just seemed to me that the student voice is not present in the conversation. I want to create some guests.
I think what's difficult, especially, is it's kind of hard to feel like no one in positions of power is are fighting for you. No one to say that you care, but there's no action or no initiative is it feels very superficial. And ultimately it will take efforts from politicians and legislatures because at the student level, there is we can try and do things to improve our own safety, but it does take the work of politicians as well. And it's really difficult because the issue has been so polarized that it feels to even make a tiny bit of change, it would take so much effort. So there's no accountability almost. We're primary, we are primary constituents of these politicians, and no one is fighting for us to just be able to go to school and be alive. Like that is really difficult. And I just don't know how there's not more like urgency in like our legislatures, because this has happened so many times, and like Soliana said earlier, it's just like the cycle of thoughts and prayers and then nothing else. Like,
and it occurs to me that everyone has, after this happens, after these things happen, that everyone has like a finger of blame to point at at what point, right? Was it a failure of mental health in the community? Is it a failure of, in this case, Texas's permissive gun purchase laws? Is it a failure of the school safety system that was in place at the school, or a failure of the police force, which is under a lot of scrutiny right now in Uvalde? Is it a failure of the teacher who didn't have the door locked, as if that makes a lot of difference when you have an AR-15 outside the door? Almost at all of the points in this, regardless of your political perspective, there's somebody else you could point the finger of blame to. But I think part of what I think we have to realize is that it's a systemic problem. And your system is delivering exactly the kinds of outcomes it's designed to do. And so if you want that to change, you have to disrupt multiple parts of the system to do that. Sam, you had something.
I was probably going to say the same thing, but I think it's really difficult with how our system is set up, in the sense that I think, I'm just going to say it, I think mostly Republicans are really they love the Second Amendment, and I think there's been over the past 50, 60 years, there's been this really big change in the definition of the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. And I think, after the school shooting, Smith & Wesson, a gun company, and lots of others, their stocks went up 6%, and that happens every mass shooting or school shooting. People are really afraid after a school shooting that their guns are going to be taken away, and I think it's just really sad that you are preventing school safety laws because of this idea that we should have military weapons as a civilian. And I know that's political, but it really upsets me that I think there are politicians who are trying to do stuff, but because it's so close right now that it's impossible to get stuff done that is meaningful because of this. The conservatives tend to love gun rights, and that's what their constituents want, and they will choose that over protecting school safety. And that's just my thought.
It's a very complicated issue. Of course, no one would want this kind of outcome. But again, our society and culture, the country is creating these kinds of outcomes through a multitude of different steps. The Second Amendment question is one that comes up and needs to be discussed. Because again, if you look at the macro level, the number of mass murders that take place in countries, the United States is by hundreds the outlier in that. And the availability of weapons means that when you have a conflict or you have an urge, there's one around that you can act on. That's not true. It just is sort of simple logic that if something is available to you, you're more likely to use it. The Second Amendment, in this context, I think you're right. Recently, it has the definition of it seems to have shifted to focus on the right of people to bear arms shall not be infringed. But there's another part to that phrase that is often not talked about. That is the beginning of that statement is a well-regulated militia is essential to welfare of the nation. Therefore, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, therefore, the right of people to bear arms shall not be infringed. So it's in the context of a well-regulated militia that the statement around the Second Amendment is there. And it was in the context when the founders wrote it that they were under attack by a well-organized foreign nation. The most powerful nation on earth at that time was the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and they felt like it was important to protect themselves from the tyranny that they experienced, that the population would be armed, so that you could defend yourself. But I have to imagine that in the late 1700s, if someone were going into buildings and killing children, that context would have been different, how they constructed things. So does the Second Amendment, or thinking around it, need to shift and change light of where we are now? So sometimes I think, and this is the opinion statement, sometimes I think we can be dogmatic about what the framers wrote in the Constitution and not realize that it was written in a context. There was an environment in which they wrote that. And they intended for it to evolve and change over time. That's why it's an amendment process that was built into it. Other thoughts, and then I want to move us forward. It sounds like there is sort of consensus that you'd like to engage in this. Yeah, Delaney.
So, I don't know how it is for everyone else, but when I was in middle school, I remember possibly having up to 4 random lockdown drills a year. And it was intense, it was strict, everyone got quiet. I don't remember there ever being jokes made, or it wasn't taken seriously by teachers or anything like that. But I've been in high school for 3 years now, and I come from a small county, but I remember 2 lockdown drills in 3 years that weren't taken seriously, and everyone's making jokes about some kid that sits in the back of the class dressed in all black with his hood up and saying that he's going to be the next school shooter. And that is awful. And I don't think, for me, from what I see, it's not being taken seriously at any level. Because there's a TikTok trend, or there's something on Facebook, and parents go crazy on Facebook, and they send out a letter and it says, there's no reason to be afraid to send your child to school anymore, or this Friday, there's no threat for us this Friday over something that's happened online. It's not going to make us, your child, safe. How can you say that when all of this happens and we don't have drills and we don't do what's going on? Why is it just dismissed? And it's not talked about, and I don't know. I just feel like it's not being taken seriously.
And it keeps happening. Yeah. Where we lived before returning to Kentucky was Jefferson County, Colorado. We were Chase Wood School for several years, and that district contains Columbine High School. And it's also been the site of 3 school shootings in its history. So it was a community that took this issue very seriously. And the whole wearing of sort of dark clothes and combat fatigues and all that traces back to the Columbine shooters, videos that were released in the wake of that. It sort of, some would argue, created this movement, I call it kind of a mental virus nationally around that this is a solution for people. So in the wake of that, of course I wasn't there when that happened, but I can tell you that it never heals. The damage of that now is over 20 years ago. It never heals, and we had to work continuously to protect Columbine High School because there were threats around it almost daily. Someone would say that they were going to come and repeat that, or someone watched those videos and read the things that Dylan Klebold wrote and were inspired by that and wanted to repeat it. So that it was a multi-million-dollar effort to secure Columbine High School. That was an ongoing issue, but I'm sure Marshall County now has elements of that as well. Well, it sounds like there's a willingness to engage in this very difficult issue. I appreciate your courage and your perspectives. I think will be really valuable. What I'd like us to do, and I'll sort of walk you through how an idea sort of around a structure for this. I think I'd like you to just reflect on last week and what happened, all the things that you've heard, going from shooter, and the shooter's past, and the shooter's history, to what happened that day, um, from the breach of entry into the school, what even happened before the breach of entry into the school, what happened in the classroom, what happened in those terrible 70-some minutes that parents were outside demanding to go in while the shooter was still inside, the police were outside. To the end of that crisis when finally a border patrol agent breached and took the shooter's life. And then the fallout that happened, now the conversation that's taking place now. Reflect on that all of those sort of facts that you know. And I'd like to ask you to just take a minute to quietly reflect on that. And then I'm going to ask you to find someone else, and we'll mix around the room, find someone or a pair or a trio if you haven't had a chance to talk to today. And dialogue that for a few minutes. Then we'll sit back down, and I want to bring out from your recollections sort of components of this. Like, what are the parts of this? Because what happened in Texas is this is not a new phenomenon anymore. Like, there's a cycle, pattern, of experience that these things go through, and we're now in the arc of right now. And so, what are the parts of it? Going even into, I saw the president was in Texas, I think, yesterday, even with the family. So there's a recovery process as well that Uvalde is going through. What are the parts of it? And then, if we can, Tony, on the screen, if we can put up sort of the elements of this as the students think about them, I think that can help us formulate the components of the white paper. Like, what are the topics that we want to get into and have you as students weigh in on different elements of this. So we'll sort of today have as a goal that we've really kind of written an outline for what the parts are going to be. And then the last thing that I'll ask you to do is sort of self-organize into different teams of 2 or 3 people in each sort of in each sort of topic. And each of those teams will be responsible for writing that component. We'll support you with creating a collaboration space electronically where you can do some writing. Probably set up a meeting a little later where you can organize virtually a little bit and talk to each other. But really, we are going to rely on you to do a lot of the writing. We want to make sure that the voice is authentic for students, and we can support with collaboration and editing and suggestions, and ultimately publication. Dr. Brewer is here. She's our Director of Education Policy. She has offered to help coordinate and support the study as well. So maybe I've given you too much information. Does that sound okay as a process? Let's start.
I'm going to create a Google link so that way it stays up here, and I'll share the link in the chat. For those of you that are virtually, or if you guys are on your phone, it looks like I can create breakouts too, so when it comes to that point, I can just maybe divide them group in 2, okay, and then have them have discussions in their group, if that works.
So let's do this right now. I want you to take about 2 minutes and just reflect on all the things that happened. And those that are online, when we come back from that reflection, I want to open things up to you to make sure that we've heard from you on anything that you want to add at this point. So let's take 2 minutes now and just reflect on the process of what's taking place. Let's come back together, and folks that are online, anything that you want to add to the conversation at this point, or you just want to pause and make sure that we are checking in with you?
Feel free to raise your hand. I see several people are in the Google Doc. Oh, let's see. I have to change my editing. Of course I have to change the editing. Give me a moment. Let's see here.
Okay, not hearing from anyone there. We'll keep circling back and creating opportunities for you to jump in. I think Tony has created a document that's in the process of being made editable. And when it comes to that point, Tony, if we can share that on the screen for everyone, and then we'll work it in. So what I'd like you to do now is just kind of mix up, walk across the room, you know, make eye contact with someone, introduce yourselves if you don't know each other, and just process for a few minutes about sort of the events and what took place. Okay, thank you for that conversation. Thanks, Liana and Logan, for bringing Chase into that too. I mean, Chase is going into the 4th grade, but he's no stranger to this subject, as are all of you. And I appreciate the students online that have done a great job really putting some of their thoughts, even though we were able to have some of this conversation in the room because we were all here together. Our students online found a way to do that with each other electronically, just relay their experiences and some of their reactions right there where they can see it with each other. We'll just read a couple of these and try to pull from them some topics or concepts. So I'll start with the first one there. Rayma's got something that really stuck out to me was that the gun was purchased legally, meaning that this event could continue to happen as there was nothing illegal. I feel like background checks need to be done. Purchasing assault rifle, very necessary due to the dangerous guns that they could be dangerous. It bothers me the United States is the only country where school shootings are happening consistently. U.S. guns have become politicized, which allows no progress to be made in preventing the issue. So I think that's a topic, Tony, to add around is really gun control background checks is a topic to address. And we'll have to talk some about a decision-making framework on this. So, for example, there may be strong statements that are made here, and what I would suggest to you is that you use a consensus-based model. And what that means is that in a consensus-based model is all of you support the document. If there's an element of it that is not supported, you keep working on it until you get everybody to yes. So I think that's a powerful framework because you stand united around it. And it does sort of can eliminate extremist positions because you have to keep working to find a place where everybody can stand. So that's what I would suggest. We'll talk about the decision-making model later. So here we have another one from VJ. Another thing was the police didn't enter the building for at least an hour. This can't be acceptable as each minute the shooter is in the building, more and more casualties will arise. Legislation which requires this might be critical in the future. It should reflect on previous cases and see where the reaction time and other forces which responded to the scene. So this is actually something that after the Columbine shooting, that the practice was supposed to have changed. And for most places it did. In the Columbine shooting, none of you were born to witness that, but those of us who watched that unfold on national television could see that a shooting was happening. There were helicopters and people surrounding the whole building, and the police waited outside for hours. And the reason was, at that time, police were trained that it was a hostage situation. So you don't enter. You start to try and establish communication and negotiate with people in the building. Of course, those two shooters had no interest in negotiating with anybody. So after Columbine, one of the changes that happened was that police are now taught to immediately breach the building and engage the shooter. Of course, in Texas, that didn't happen. So you have, again, sort of the ideal and what really occurred being not necessarily in alignment. But I think another topic here is sort of police or law enforcement.
Training?
Yeah, trainings, yeah, if that's something. And we can edit down, I just want to capture the topics. Let's get one more of these, Tony. We can scroll up some. There was one around, scroll down a little bit. Here's one. I saw something online where people from foreign countries voiced their opinions on the U.S. One of the things that stuck out to me was it's very strange and hard to believe that events like mass shootings occur in our country, since it very rarely happens anywhere else. I agree with the idea of background checks, purchasing assault, or I even think it would be a good idea to have a mental health screening on a person. So we got a couple of ideas in here. So let's scroll down and let's add as a topic, possible topic, a comparative analysis. So that means looking at other countries or systems and what could be learned from them. And the second element that was raised in that comment was mental health. And really, this writer was talking about mental health in the context of background check, but certainly there are mental health elements that could be raised here in screening. We now know that the shooter in the Texas case had a lot of disturbing behavior in months leading up to this, threatening violence or assault, particularly against women online and girls online in the months leading up to this. All this was documented. And there were reports that this person is scary and was scaring people online. So what could have been done ahead of time? So mental health. How many of you are familiar with the STOP system in Kentucky? Hands up if you know what it is, the STOP system.
Tip.
Yeah, tip line. Yeah, tip line. It's called the STOP tip line. Okay, half of you are. Okay, so I think let's add early warning systems. So again, and Dr. Woods Tucker that was here earlier, he was a superintendent in Douglas County, Colorado. And actually, when he was superintendent, they had a school shooting when he was superintendent there at the STEM charter school. In one of the things that I think is comparatively different in Kentucky and Colorado, of course, had a number of school shootings and a number of mass murders. So they have established a system called Safe to Tell, which is an anonymous tip reporting system. And I can tell you, if I'd asked that question of students in Colorado, all of their hands would have gone up. They knew what it was. They knew how to access it because the communities, the schools constantly sort of talked about it, raised the issue up so that people knew that's where you could report things. And it generated if you reported something, either called in or sent in a message, or even there was an app for it that would go on phones. If you send something in, that went to a dispatcher who logged the information and sent a copy to the local police force and to the school superintendent where that report came from. And then there was follow-up to make sure something happened with that report. There had to be some kind of resolution. You had to do something with that. So I think that could be an area that we talk about investigating more in Kentucky. What the tip line or the STOP system in Kentucky is designed to do that, but is it being used to the extent that it could be? So I think the sort of preventative elements. What are some other things that you discussed in your small groups, just as topics or concepts? We again can lay out the different elements of this. Yeah, all right.
So we didn't talk as much about changes that need to be made. We look more through the timeline of the shooting, but from my work that I've done in the legislature and with educational advocacy, one thing that's been infuriating in Kentucky specifically is appropriations, because it feels like there's so many mandates that are made for schools that go unfunded. Like there's the mandate that there needs to be SRs in schools, but it's unfunded. There's the mandate that schools should have a 250-to-1 student counselor ratio, but it goes unfunded. And so there's so many things that are trying to be done, but there's nothing backing them, because so much of it is put onto students and school districts to implement the changes that there's no support, it feels like, from the state to implement those changes.
Excellent. So let's add unfunded mandates, particularly related to SROs and counseling and mental health. Excellent points. Bentley, yeah.
I'd like to add one thing with the comparative analysis and mental health part. I know specifically in Sweden and Japan, in order to buy any form of gun, whether it's a handgun, rifle, whatever, you have to have gone through a full psychological analysis before you can even consider doing it. And it just lessens the likelihood of someone just one day going to Walmart, getting a gun, and then going on a killing spree just because they feel like it.
Thank you. I think we can, in our comparative analysis, that can be the kind of information we go into. Okay.
One thing we talked about was, and this is more, maybe not really a topic, but kind of like just data to know that would go with like the SROs is like, a lot of times I see in the news like when there are school shootings, they talk about, like the police arrived and they breached. So I was just wondering like how many of those schools had like resource officers in the schools? What was that like for them? Like how are they trained on those like areas? Because a lot of times it is, I feel like, or at least you hear, like police did it themselves by entering the school and not necessarily the resource officers themselves. So I was just wondering, like, what are like the actual like data around that?
Right. So I think in the Uvalde case, there was no engagement with an SRO outside the building. Of course, in the Stoneman Douglas shooting, there was an SRO that did not enter the building. There's an interesting whole multi-page article in Men's Health this month where that officer sort of tells his side of the story and what he experienced. But it's a complicated question because often you see SROs put forward as the answer for how we solve this, but we really see variability in its effectiveness. So maybe SROs is something that we've got in there, maybe as a part of the law enforcement. I don't know if that fits together or not. We can think about combining them. Sam.
I was going to talk more about SROs, but I'll do that for its own topic.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I know one thing, like, at the end, when we were talking to Dr. Brewer, and she was talking about how intense a lockdown drill would be, like, where, like, the principal would, like, come by and make sure, like, teachers would not open the doors, and that, and I know, like, at least in, like, general, like, high school, what we do is, like, go on lockdown, everybody, they go check the hall, make sure all the doors are closed and locked, but they don't really, like, test to see, like, if this was an actual lockdown, how would the students react? Because, like, we just go and we sit there and be quiet, but that's because everybody has their phone. But, like, what would you do in, like, that situation? So I feel like a simulation or something, like, maybe once a year would maybe, like, help maybe ease tension of, like, what would happen if this would happen, even though we have the drills.
Right. And we've kind of evolved that as well. I mean, it was often taught that you just huddle quietly in the room. Now there's an element to flee. You can run. That's where you start. Sort of that run, hide, fight. This kind of procedure that's often used today. So maybe active shooter drills is a component of this that the students in here are used to experiencing like that.
I agree with that. Like I said, in middle school, we did a lot of stricter things. So we would be in transition time, we'd be moving between classes, and they'd call a lockdown drill. And nobody would know if it was real or what it was because it would be like a real test. And I remember myself and like 10 other students ended up in a classroom by ourselves without an adult. And that's a real situation that can happen. But also, I was just wondering, I don't know if this could be a topic, but things we have that we don't use completely, like we have metal detectors and bag checks, but if it goes off, they kind of just send you through, and like they just have a belt on, or like, and sometimes you're like, hey, you just don't have a belt on, like things like that, or like we have security, doors are locked in the front office, and you buzz and you have to say why you're there. We got a new secretary, and she doesn't make you say why you're there, like things that aren't being properly used, maybe. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, well, the really screenings and physical safety, because I mean it has to do with do you do screenings? Do you create? Some school districts have metal detectors in place, some don't. there's really not a clear best practice on them. Some people think it's essential because you can, if done properly, you can screen out weapons just like they do on airplanes. Other folks that are experts on this feel like all you've done is created a choke point for the shooter. Like now you've got a big line of people standing together. And that's not great either. And then there's the sort of security of the building. You often hear people, politicians usually say, well, they just needed a single point of entry. Well, that would be ideal, and schools that are built today take that into account. You have a lot of older schools that were not built with anybody thinking about this. One of the schools that we had in Jeffco, Colorado, had 113 ground level, meaning that you could walk into it, ground level, windows. So they were about as wide as I am and about 5 feet tall. And the only way we could have created a single point of entry is to build a wall around the school. And that's in part what we ended up doing, something like that. But it is depending on the age of the school. Many of you went to school in buildings that were built in the 1920s, where certainly nobody was thinking about these sorts of things. So it's not as complicated. Creating just a single point of entry in schools is.
No, because there's like the bus drop-off point and the high school, you have the student lot because students are driving, and the teacher lot and the buses and all that stuff. There's no way to filter all that.
Yeah, nowadays we design schools and think about school safety, but 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. We'll kind of go around. Sam, I'll come back to you. So, yeah, Bethany, go ahead.
Another thing about the single point of entry thing, though, is you also have to meet fire codes and have the ability for everyone to get out of the building in 60 seconds if there's fire.
Right.
So there really
I think,
is.
Tony is a potential topic, sort of physical safety systems. So we know, for example, in the Sandy Hook shooting, that shooter shot his way into the building. So even though they had a single point of entry, it wasn't secure from shooters. And shooters went in and shot doors and windows open and got in. Now we're down in class. Yeah, Sam.
Tell me if this is off topic, but could one of them be like what because I know our legislature has a supermajority of the Republican Party, what they're proposing with this? I mean, are they proposing anything with the Texas shooting?
I don't know. I haven't talked to them about it. But this, the work that you're doing may be the impetus of that, right? We may want to bring some legislators together and have them review this with you and talk about what they might be able to do. I think what Ari was talking about earlier, that we've got laws on the books around council ratios and SROs that haven't been fully funded. That's a great place to start. And could we do something more with sort of the tip line, the reporting line, where it's more known and more used, and there's really a system involved for that? That's another great step. So I think as an outcome of this, engaging with legislators is something that you can do. Other thoughts or reactions, and we'll also pause here. I'll go around the room just with a look one more time, but I'll pause and ask if there's any of our students that are online that want to weigh in with their thoughts of it. I appreciate several of you have written into the document already. What we'll do with those is we'll go through and comb through those and see if there's any other sort of topics or ideas that emerge from them that we want to add as potential sections of this document. But anyone else in the room, just thoughts or reactions? Yeah, a little bit.
I think one thing we were just kind of talking about it was like creating, like obviously it's a horrible situation, it's a fight or flight moment, but creating like a plan, like between our schools. He was talking about how they have like a black code where they all, if they are in that situation, then they'll try and run to the highway. Like I know at my school we talk some are like we'll stay in the classroom. If we can get out, we can, but it's like never like a clear laid out plan. So creating that very structured, here's what we're doing. Maybe that is like the what Kentucky State Police come through the school to create that plan or whatever it may be, but like one that is checked and stuff.
Right. Well, one of the steps that we may want to do, so I think this is under sort of active shooter and evacuation, is you might want to interview Ben Wilcox, the state school safety marshal, around what are the requirements and procedures that we have in Kentucky. Some of that may be there already. Yeah.
One thing I was just reading is that during the recent Texas school shooting, there was a woman in the lunchroom called out a code black, and a lot of the teachers and employees didn't know what they were supposed to do for that. So I think maybe better teacher training in those situations, like just talking them through it, could be something to like look into.
Right. So several of you have experienced active shooter situations and drills. And what we're hearing is there's sort of variability in how seriously those are taken. And then, of course, things can happen chaotically. I mean, often we drill from the point of everybody knows the drill is coming, you're sitting in your classroom. What happens if the shooting takes place during dismissal? You have really kind of organized chaos taking place. What happens in that situation? So, crisis situations don't occur in a organized fashion. There's a sense of randomness. I guess in the military, folks are talking about the fog of war. There's a lot that you don't know that's taking place. Folks online, anything that you would add with this discussion or potential topics that we haven't raised up?
Just feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay. Maybe looks like our folks online have been participating in the by writing. Tony, let's go down and look at the potential topics again and see if we can maybe combine these some. So we have gun control, background checks. It's certainly, from a political standpoint, something that is being discussed nationally right now. And the piece that I wrote on this last week, a point that I've tried to make is I really given up hope that Washington's ever going to do anything about this. If they didn't do something after Sandy Hook, you have 26 6 and 7-year-olds that are taken. I just at that point gave up hope that Washington would do anything. So I said it's going to fall into states to take action because you're going to do something. So I think this is something that could be discussed in the context of the state taking action. Police and law enforcement trainings, comparative analysis, mental health supports, early warning systems. Let's combine, Tony, this engaging with legislators and unfunded mandates. Maybe engaging with legislators is the topic. And then a bullet under that is the unfunded mandate. Yeah. Right. So then now we've got using school resource officers, active shooter drills, screenings and physical safety. That's an element of it. Probably the only element of this I think I could add is there is a component around sort of recovery from this that communities go through that we could have you talk about, and it has to do with really the process of grieving and reconciliation after the fact. Did you see Texas go through that right now? Any other potential topics? So ideas, so we have 10 sections. I wonder if we could organize these sort of into proactive steps we can do. Like what can we do to get upstream of the shooting, right? That would have to do with your mental health and SROs. And then there's sort of things that happen in the event of an active shooter, right? And so now you've got your active shooter drills. I'm just trying to think about a way to organize it that we can clump some things together. Maybe there's like proactive elements, active shooter elements, sort of recovery elements, and then within those you've got different concepts. Like proactive would be gun control, mental health, early warning systems. All those things are what things you do before you get to the point of an active shooter. Now, I think an SRO a well-trained SRO is a proactive element as well. But most people see them as a component in an active shooter situation. So what about that? What if we do sort of before incident, during incident, after incident recovery? We organize into 3 groups, and I'll let y'all sort out which topics go where. I mean, and maybe that they cross over something. Yeah.
I know you mentioned the stop tip line. Is that part of one of those?
What is it?
The stop tip line. Or you said stop system.
Yeah, stop tip line. Yeah, I think that's that mental health.
Or is it the early warning system? No.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay.
That's where it fits. It's official. I looked it up this morning. Stop, S-T-O-P, and it's an acronym for something. In Colorado, we called it Safe to Tell. It's supposed to do the same thing, but it's the tip line. Yep.
I know they always talk about it in like our schools at least, quite a bit.
Man, I remember as superintendent, I would get dozens of those a week. And we would have, they all, you had to circle back, the Attorney General's office ran it, so we had to, whatever resolution, action we took, we had to report back to the Attorney General, and so they had a log that all this was taken, or the action was taken. Any other thoughts before we sort of organize into 3 groups?
You know, the one other thing I was going to mention is we have a lot of class of 2022ers, and so I'm wondering, you know, if you all want to continue in this conversation, that would be a great opportunity for you to stay involved, and maybe I'm thinking, like, depending on how many groups we have, maybe at least 1 graduating senior with the smaller groups, maybe 2, depending on, it's totally up to you, obviously. You know, you've graduated, but we would love to still have your perspective, if you'd like to participate in being one of these groups.
Yeah. So let's do this, Tony. After, down here where you got before incident, during incident, after incident, in parentheses after that, let's go ahead and we can put some names. And if you're online, please go ahead and Tony's going to put these parentheses in down further in the Google document. Go ahead and write your name in, which group you'd like to be in, and then we'll capture some names too. So who would like to be involved in the before incident group? These are things proactively that we can do before something happens. So let's see, we've got Bentley, Julie, Vanessa, Arnav, Ari, Svendena, and Delaney.
Julia, Bentley, Vanessa, Ari, Solela.
I'm
I'm sorry, did I skip you, Solela?
Well, I was like, yeah, it's
Okay.
Arnav too.
And Arnav.
And Arnav.
So, and then.
Did I miss somebody over here? And Delaney. Okay.
Again, if online, folks that are online, feel free to add yourselves to that. And then, so we got during incident, this is really an active shooter situation. We have Sam, Bentley would like to be involved in that one, Roheen, Ella, thank you, and Logan. Okay. And then I see some folks putting their name in there. BJ, thank you. After incident and recovery, so Alexandra and Solyana. Great.
Soyana, Alexandra, Soyana.
I can switch over it to.
So can I.
Chase is worried that one of the 2 of you wasn't getting to speak.
During incident. I had my hand up.
Okay.
Chase was looking out.
During the incident.
Sorry, guys. My hand up.
Yeah, I wasn't sure who he meant, but yeah, thank you, Chase. Thank you for making sure everybody's included.
You said during incident?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think we've organized into 3 groups. What we'll do is sort of a next step. We'll follow up with you on email, everybody here, so you've got access to the document. We'll also, Dr. Brewer, if you can work with creating some opportunities for these 3 teams to meet and talk. And, you know, feel free to just start writing or throw in links and ideas so we can all collaborate here. As a further support, I would be happy to write a foreword to this, talk about why we're doing this and what it means, and then Tony and her team, we can help with publicizing it once we get it into a point that we're ready to publish it, and if we can get a briefing with our legislators. And this might fit in nicely with the work that we've done around mental health as well. I mean, that's a part of this that we could probably build on. Delaney, did you have something you want to add? No? We'll stop it. Anyone online, will come to you in just a moment to see if there's any final comments or words that you want to close with. But I'll also do that with folks here. Anything just that we want to make sure that we talk about that hasn't been said, or folks that feel like realize something else really. Yes, thanks, Sam.
In your opinion, because you have seen it all the past 20 years, do you think there is change, like true change happening with school shootings? I mean, from Sandy Hook and Columbine to, the Texas shooting that happened last week?
If anything, I feel like they're accelerating. They're becoming more frequent. And I think it spreads like a virus. People that are in the mindset to cause harm get in their head that this is a way that they can sort of achieve some kind of fame or notoriety. And whatever pain they're feeling, express it by causing pain in others. So I do feel like it's becoming a bigger problem, not a smaller one. I wish that we weren't in the place that we are now, but I really feel strongly that we've got to do something to try and disrupt what we have, or we should expect this to continue. Yeah.
Also, in relation to advice, given that you were, the superintendent at Jeff Co., and which obviously has Columbine, so how do you kind of instruct, or how would you advise school districts to keep the legacy alive of those, of what happened, but also the victims? How do you ensure?
Yeah, one of the great connections I made there was with a man named Frank DeAngelis. He was the principal at Columbine on the day that it happened. And I think he was in his first year as principal. And of course, in the days after the shooting at Columbine, there was a lot of hate and anger directed at him. Why didn't you stop this? And calls for him to resign. And of course, at that point, especially 1999, no one was even thinking about this. Schools were much more open than they are today for this kind of thing. To Frank's credit, he committed, he came back to work and he said, I'm going to finish my life here, finish my professional career at this school, helping this community recover from it, and that's exactly what he did. And he continues to be the one that carries that legacy. He's now sought out. So, for example, in the situation in Texas, I don't know that this is the case, but I can almost guarantee you that every time it happened, they called Frank. They wanted him to come to the community and talk about, here's how you heal and recover from this. What are some things that you can do to improve and get better? So I think on the recovery component, if maybe you want to talk to Frank, I can organize that. You can talk to somebody who helped their community heal from it. So one of the things that Frank talks about doing every morning, he wakes up and puts his feet on the floor. He says the names of all of the 13 victims. So what a burden he's carrying his whole life. Also, just an incredible person who's helped that community heal. And I mean, you visit Columbine High School today. I've never been in a more positive, welcoming place. It is really a powerful and positive community for all of the families that live around it and the students in it. It is a very positive place. And no one, we were talking earlier about the sense of belonging. I've never seen a place that has a greater sense of belonging and common. So I think that's Frank's legacy.
If I could just add in, this is a very emotionally charged topic, obviously. It's something that I think a lot of people struggle to fully immerse themselves in because it is so emotionally overwhelming. As you sort of think about the topic that you've selected, you don't want to lose that sort of urgency, sense of urgency, and this is something that we've all committed to drafting together, but wherever you can, pull back a little bit and look at the research, what other states have done, whatever you can do to sort of develop an area of expertise will be really helpful as we work on this, because we have to move beyond that emotive response, right? So we need to move to where you can make recommendations that can be acted on. And I think that's where a lot of times we fail to have any significant change, because we all agree this is horrific. And we think about these children's lives that were lost, but it's hard to move to that stage of action unless we sort of are able to make recommendations that are solid and based in a level of expertise. So if you have time, I know we're entering into the summer, but if you have time to sort of think about the topic that you've selected and do some research, that would be excellent.
Thank you, Mary. And I'll add, I mean, there's a sense of urgency to this, but this should take as much time as it takes. You know, as much time as you need to work on it to get it in a place where you feel proud of it and can stand behind it. That's as long as it takes. It's not an issue that's going away immediately. And I do think that it's important that we use that consensus model, that all of you read through this and think, am I comfortable with this? And if not, we keep working on it. We'll get to a place where all of you can stand behind it and say, I support this work. We'll turn now to our friends that are online and give you the last word. Anything else that you would like to add just as we close out here?
Don't be shy. We're going to have virtual meetings for most of the month, so you can practice unmuting yourself and raising your hand.
Okay, well, hearing none, thank you, Tony, for you and your team organizing today. I threw Tony for a loop last night when I said, I think I want to change the activity that I've got for the students, but I'm really glad we did, and I appreciate the way that all of you engaged in that. I think we're going to do something important here, so thank you. We have lunches available.
One quick, I just have a couple of notes. So we've talked about this advisory council really having different opportunities that are available to either volunteer as a judge or on a council. And so I just want to run through just a few things that we have available right now. And for this is for everyone, and I will put this in the email as well. First of all, I remember Heather mentioning that Thursday is the school counselor advisory meeting. I think some of you have signed up to provide perspective at the beginning of that meeting. You don't have to be there for the entire amount, but if you're interested in that, just make sure you shoot me an email. Number two, we're going to do this for the first time ever, in that we are currently judging our 2023 Kentucky Teacher of the Year applications, and I would like to have one active student serve on that. I will notate that the month of June is going to be the time to get it done. We have over 353 applications. We're dividing it into different groups, so I think each judge will have about maybe 25 or so. I don't know, Dr. Jones, are you back there? You want to stand? This is Dr. Glypta Sandgrider-Jones. She's our newest staff member on the communications staff, and she has kind of taken over all of our recognitions. Do you want to just give them a brief?
Yes, so this month really will be, or June will be the month of judging for the 2023 Kentucky Teacher of the Year, which is a very prestigious award. It recognizes the top teacher in Kentucky, and then we also recognize several other teachers in that group as well. But the invitation is for a student perspective to serve on that judging panel, and the student will have about 29 or 30, just depends on the packet, application, and there's a scoring rubric. It's a very robust application, so it is a time commitment. And again, just consider, there's some more months and obligations, but it's something, teachers teach you, they teach students. So having you help and identify that top teacher would be very important. So we'll be in touch if you're interested. Look for Tony's email, and we'll share the information. Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you.
And then I heard from Amanda Ellis, this is a seat that Logan is vacating on the Commonwealth Education Continuum. Logan, do you want to just give a real brief overview of what that is? They're looking for one student to serve on the continuum.
Yeah, so it was created, I guess, in 2020, and it's creating a more easier flow between the preschool through post-secondary education pipeline. Each year they do like work groups, so there's usually 3. I got to work on the educators, workforce, and diversity work group, so finding ways that we could increase the diversity and overall retention and stuff of teachers. So it was really cool to get that perspective. It's between KDE, the Bashir administration, and the Council on Post-Secondary Education. But it's really cool to kind of see kind of like what we do here, but with a lot of other different kind of stakeholders and stuff around the whole education spectrum.
And that meets, the CEC meets quarterly via Zoom. So that's something that you could participate in virtually. One more thing before I let Dr. Glass explain the next thing is that I'm constantly getting calls from legislators or the governor, lieutenant governor. Ella can relate. Hey, they would love a student voice on this. And so I'm going to make sure to add all of our new members to the GroupMe, and that's the best way that we've found to communicate. So be sure just to keep checking your GroupMe on different opportunities that come up. Our last thing is really exciting. It's standard setting. And I'm going to let it's so exciting. I'm going to let Dr. Glass explain what that is, but we're looking for
pretty straightforward. So in the state test, how they have like proficient, advanced, different levels. So you have to have a group that gets together and looks at the data and decides where the lines are. And so they would like a student to be part of that committee that does that. So if you'd like to be involved in the group that does standard setting, what we'll do is send out an email reminding you of it and what the commitments are. And the first one who responds gets to do it. So work with it. Yeah, that's probably the best way we can do it.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be one meeting in August. Because again, this is going to be for the state test that just was administered. So it is a pretty quick turnaround.
That's so funny. I just had a conversation with folks at the DC Board of Education about involving students into like the standards and decision making in terms of that. I talked about this council and how we kind of reviewed some standards over the years. So that's perfect.
Awesome. Well, shout out to Rhonda Sims. She reached out, and Michael Hackworth. Both of them reached out last week. And they're really excited.
We'll probably we have more than one interested, so when we send out a message on this, we'll set a end date for the people to respond, and then whoever's applied by then, we'll see, pick one randomly, or see if we can talk Rhonda, our associate commissioner, that's over this, and having more than motion.
Perfect.
Chase and I have to go.
All right.
Chase, thank you.
Well, we have lunch.
Great job being part of the group
Yep.
today.
So we will conclude, and there will be lunch back in that area that we had before. So thank you all.